Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. So a bit more tense, screamed midwife Lilia in one of the wards of a luxury private clinic. All right, Sarah, take notes. 200. A young Sarah, a girl interning at this clinic, nervously wrote everything the woman said on a card. Victoria helped Lilia cut the umbilical cord and handed the baby to the mother. Nice work, Emma. As you name her, Victoria praised her laboring mother, who she had guided through the pregnancy from the beginning. Michael and I decided to name her after his grandmother, Sophia. Through tears, the girl spoke through her tears. She was happy that during all these months of pregnancy, Victoria had helped her both physically and mentally. Emma never once doubted her decision. Choosing this Montfort clinic was indeed the best of the best in Canada. Although she had to pay a lot of money for it, the whole 9 months went comfortably, just like her labor. She looked at her baby for a long time and finally looked up at Victoria, her midwife, to whom the girl was insanely grateful. "Thank you," she whispered. She received a genuine smile in return. Victoria was one of the best midwife doctors in Toronto. She had attended many conferences, meetings, competitions, and was indeed an experienced doctor. Therefore, she undoubtedly had clients. The girl worked in a private maternity hospital, the Ford Foundation, and she was actually paid good money. However, always when she was asked if she wanted to open her own clinic, she shook her head, arguing that there would be more financial worries than the work itself with the client. And she really loved her business, making sure the mother and newborn were okay. She left the room, leaving them to the care of specialists on behalf of experienced than her, but true professionals. Thanking everyone for their excellent work, she left the labor and delivery room and walked down the hallway towards her office. She was joined by another midwife who was carrying some papers in a brown folder. She was obviously overjoyed about something. Victoria watched her with a puzzled, smiling expression on her face. "And yet I decided to ask what happened. But at last I thought you wouldn't ask." Testament girl with joy, and even jumped up like a child. "I was approved, Vic." To Victoria at first did not realize what her colleague meant. However, remembering their dialogue a week ago, she immediately brightened up. "What's true? You were finally allowed to adopt him." "Yes. There were problems with the paperwork, but John helped me, and now we can't wait to be parents." "Stella, congratulations. It took you this long. Finally, one more happy family. I'm so happy for you and John. I'm bursting with emotion." Stella decided to hug Victoria and thank her for being there for her when she made the decision. Stella had never wanted to give birth, reasoning that it would ruin her body, or the baby could be disabled. And despite the doctor's attempts to convince her that technology has long advanced and none of her fears would come true, she flatly refused to make her own child. And a month ago, the girl still decided to start a family and take a child from the orphanage. Together with her husband, John, she went through various adoption procedures. After all, this case is not simple and also has pitfalls. As long as the paperwork is formalized, as long as the couple passes all the medical examination. However, it took 3 weeks and she was finally approved for adoption. She had long ago found a boy she liked. The girl didn't want to do like most couples who wanted a smart and handsome child. She was only looking for a little man who would love her as much as she loved him. In none of the shelters, Stella found a boy from the age of 7 named Mark. She knew immediately that this boy would be like family to her. So she decided to adopt him by all means. "I can pick Mark up tomorrow. I'm so happy, Vic," the girl said as they walked down the hospital corridor. What she saw, however, was not the same face that had been smiling at her a moment ago. Though Victoria pretended to be happy for her friend, her smile was strained and her gaze spoke of something else. The girl walking beside her was desperate, and it seemed to Stella that Victoria was about to cry. The girl slowed her step, and Vicky automatically did the same, and then they stopped right in the middle of the hallway. The girl put her hand on her friend's shoulder. Vic, I didn't share the news at the wrong time, gently asked Stella. Victoria turned to her colleague and, already not hiding her tears, answered, no, it's okay, really. It's just that you are so happy. And everyone around me, friends, colleagues, customers, and I feel so lonely. Stella's sweet reply was all Stella could manage, and she wrapped her friend in a tight hug. She realized that her friend still couldn't accept the fact that she was infertile. After all, unlike her, who could afford children but didn't want to give birth, Victoria was incapable of doing so. Vicky often told her about her worries about her problem. However, Stella could only comfort her with the fact that she could take a child from an orphanage. And Victoria really thought about it. However, until now she had not taken any drastic action. After all, she didn't just want a child, she wanted a family. Victoria gently pushed Stella away and climbed out of that tight embrace, brushing away another tear. She again put on the mask of an imperious and strong woman, on which at first glance, you could not tell that she could be so vulnerable. I'm sorry for these emotions. I'm really happy for you, friend. Please don't think I'm jealous or anything. I understand you, Vike, and I'm sure you'll find your happiness. You just don't give up. The girl smiled in return. Her friend rarely called her Vicky. After all, in this abbreviation was something native. It was exactly what her mother called her. Stella decided to leave the girl alone with her thoughts and left under the pretext that she was already expected with the documents. Victoria, on the other hand, continued on her way. Back in her office, Victoria's mind was in a state of reflection. It was true that she supported her friend and was not averse to having children herself. However, the only and most important thing that distinguished her strength from her friend had a loving husband. What Victoria couldn't boast of. It had always been a problem for her. She had a completely unassuming appearance. She was even a little repulsive. However, the girl corrected the situation with her good character and cheerfulness. Victoria looked at herself in the mirror. Curly, red hair, crooked nose with asymmetrical eyebrows. Everything she saw in her reflection, she didn't like. And that was indeed a huge, heavy burden that had accompanied Victoria all her life. After all, no matter what anyone says, appearance plays a paramount role. You look at the cover, and then see you through the mind. Because of that fact, she could never find a man. They'd all run out of dates. The last one didn't even make up an excuse to leave. He just got up and walked out. Of course, if it were possible, as in a game, to show all her excellent qualities and properties, Victoria would not be equal. However, she doesn't live in a simulation, but in the real world, where your soul will only be considered when you attract them with your looks. A knock on the door brought her out of her musings. Emma, who had given birth to a baby girl a few hours ago, came in. She was holding a beautiful package, and Vicky immediately guessed that it was a gift for her labor. But at least somewhere she was truly loved and appreciated. There's our mommy. Victoria happily greeted the girl as she left the table. She wrapped her ward in a as tight an embrace as possible. It was not long after the birth, but her patient was already on her feet. What couldn't the other moms boast? Usually they took a long rest. But Emma was a brave and fighting girl. You're out of bed early. Darling, said the midwife. Oh, I'm not tired. Victoria, thanks to you. The birth was so comfortable that I already want to take my baby girl and walk with her. I am so grateful to you for the kindness and care you have given me during the whole 9 months. The girl took out a bag and handed it to her doctor. Victoria began to scrutinize its contents. I decided to buy you some useful oils and cosmetics. I would like to point out that they are of excellent quality. You know me, I don't skimp on my health, Emma said, smiling. Victoria was getting angry with paint. On her face could be seen even a slight surprise her clients often gave her gifts. Emma, however, was special. On the day she had sought help because she couldn't conceive a child, Victoria had been on duty. Of course, she was already a trained professional. However, there were too many women in labor that month, and all the midwives had their hands full. and Emma couldn't catch Victoria, who had been recommended to her by a friend, calling her the best, because the midwife just didn't have time for her. Certainly the girl was quite wealthy and could allow herself any other private clinic. However, she wanted to give birth here, since she herself was born in this very maternity hospital. But still Victoria was able to spare an hour to her visitor, who went to the hospital every day, hoping to find a doctor. "Do you sit in our ward all day long? I take it you are really serious, my dear," Victoria asked the young girl. "Please help me. I want to give birth in this hospital." "Yes, I know. That's why you came to me. I was told you've been unable to conceive for a year." "Yes, please help me. I'll spare no expense. I was assured that you can help," the girl pleaded, almost crying. Victoria looked at her sternly. Then she looked at the documents again, correcting her glasses. "Emma," so the midwife said thoughtfully, then nodded an appraising glance at the poor girl. "I don't care about the size of your wallet. I'll do my best. You follow my orders and you'll have a chance." "Thank you. God sent you." "Thank you, Victoria," Emma screamed. Memories flooded into Victoria's mind. The first ultrasound results, the long-awaited pregnancy. She was infertile, but she knew how to help the poor who longed for family happiness just as she did. That was the love of her work, her outlet. Victoria saved those who had the slightest chance of success, and she always succeeded, sometimes with great difficulty. But she never gave up and eventually became the first doctor in Toronto who could cure infertility. She was talked about in newspapers, on television, in commercials. She was invited to all sorts of foundation events, to shootings, and almost no one she did not refuse, because she knew one truth, which once her mother told her: "If you can help, help. Do not wait for a miracle. You are the miracle." Victoria was so moved by all these thoughts that she let a tear fall. What Emma couldn't help but notice: "Victoria, what are you doing? Please don't cry." "If you didn't like the gift," I stopped the touch of the doctor's hand on the girl. "Emma, thank you for giving me a chance to feel wanted again." Through tears, said midwife. Young mother awkwardly smiled and gave herself permission to feel this moment and wept. "You are an inspiration to many, Victoria. I hope you too can find your happiness. I will miss you," said the girl. And with these warm words left the office. Victoria was alone again. Today's day turned out to be too sad. What the girl did not expect. But having collected herself, she went to the desk where the computer stood and completely went to work. It really helped her to take her mind off her problems. After 2 o'clock of continuous work, the girl noticed a notification in the corner of the screen. Clicking on it, she was taken to her email. She had received an email from a medical association of doctors stating that it was recommended that she take a refresher course. Victoria wasn't surprised by this. Even though she was one of the best obstetricians in town, she often took similar courses. Since technology and knowledge do not stand still, and to stay in the top all the time, you need to keep your theoretical and practical knowledge in shape. So she happily replied to this email saying that she would definitely attend. They were to take place every 24 hours in the evening, starting tomorrow for 24 days. And this schedule suited Victoria quite well, for she was always looking for something to do in the evening, besides going out with her friends, of whom she had many. However, socializing with them made her very tired. Most of them already had children. Half of her friends were born in her own clinic where she works. And of course, all the talk was mostly about their glorious years, which drove Victoria into depression and even more enrollment. The midwife continued her laborious work at the computer, which consisted of filling out various papers. Victoria hated these formalities, as she liked to do other, more useful things rather than filling out new documents like an accountant in an office. However, these formalities had to be observed, and the girl had no choice but to obey them. Her hard and hateful work was again interrupted by a knock at the door. This time a nurse came in, bringing new cards and about the patients. Vicky at first didn't even notice her arrival. But when the young intern was about to leave, opening the door, the midwife stopped her. "Can't I fulfill one request of mine?" Victoria asked politely. The girl turned and looked puzzled at the doctor. Please make a note at the reception desk that I will be absent every evening for a month. By order of the head doctor of the department. All the documents will throw you to the mail, said Victoria, smiling sleepily at her, looked at her with a look as if she was doing a favor, and walked out. Victoria ignored that look from the nurse. They do get tired in practice. When Vike was in higher education, she too suffered from not having enough to eat, and she could barely do simple tasks, not to mention the fact that she had to smile. Unfortunately, studying to be a doctor is hard. And of course, smiling would not save the situation. So the girl understandably escorted Mew with her eyes until tomorrow. Miss Wilson, shouted to her the doctor on duty, who remained on duty for the night, while the midwife passed by and went to the elevator. The girl was really tired, and her last words had not pleased Miss at all. Even though Vika was only 30 years old, she felt that she would never be a Mrs. She would never have another last name. She would. It would always be lonely. With these thoughts, she got into a cab and drove home. Her apartment was located in Harbourfront. In Toronto's Central District, she had a swanky apartment with a view of the entire city. Vicky liked to often go out with a cup of cocoa on the balcony and look at the lights of the city at night. "Mom is home," shouted Victoria, closing the front door behind her. Her Cavalier King Charles Spaniel dog immediately came running to her. Quite an expensive pet. However, Vicky didn't feel sorry for the money for the creature that was replacing her friend, husband, and child. "I'm sorry it took so long. My boy was hungry," probably asked Victoria a rhetorical question. But unfortunately, instead of a human answer, received only a proud woof. "Let's go, my joy," said the girl, and with these words led her puppy to the kitchen. Turning on the light, she looked for food for her pet, and to her surprise, found it poured into the food for Arson, who looked at the bowl of food with greedy eyes. She opened a bottle of expensive wine, poured it into a glass, and went to her favorite balcony. This view, which she watched almost every night, could not be described in 2 words. At the very top of the skyscraper, she could not hear the noise of the cars, yet she could watch them moving along the highway. She could see lights in almost every window. Life was boiling before her eyes, and she was not dying of loneliness again. She enjoyed it and was proud of the life she was living, albeit alone. Her train of thought was interrupted by the barking of the doggy, who always did that when the phone rang, who could need her at 0 o'clock. The doctor's work never ends, so the girl still went to the phone. "Victoria Wilson speaking," she answered. "Hello, Ms. Wilson. I apologize for the late call. I need to confirm your enrollment in the course." Victoria, I was beginning to get annoyed. She hated getting calls at this hour, especially for a formality. However, after realizing that the consultant on the other end of the line was not to blame for this and was just doing her job, she answered, "Yes, I confirm that I will be present from tomorrow. Thank you. Thank you. Goodbye." But Victoria hung up. She was really annoyed by that phone call. Why couldn't she have called in the morning? She fell asleep with this mood. Entering the auditorium, Victoria saw quite a few people. Were they all gynecologists and midwives? She took an empty seat with another girl. Vika didn't really look at her neighbor, but managed to notice her beautiful dark hair tied in a ponytail. She was dressed quite openly. She was wearing a tank top and jeans. However, this bow was quite appropriate for the place. For the next hour, there was a sepulchral silence in the auditorium. Everyone listened attentively to the speaker, who looked no more than 35 years old. "That will be the end of our discussion today. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for coming." The speaker said goodbye to the doctors. Everyone quickly began to gather. There was a ruckus. Taking all the supplies in the bag, Vicky side-eye, noticed the sight of a neighbor, and turned in her direction. "They woke you up at 12 o'clock last night too?" The neighbor asked with a smile. "Yes, and I thought I was the only lucky one," Victoria said tediously. After yesterday, she didn't want to smile at all, and walked like a zombie all day. Is that why you're in a bad mood too? The perky brunette didn't stop and answered Vika in the same tone, and already wanted to get up and leave. However, she was stopped by a feeling of regret. She rude neighbor on the first day of their acquaintance. Perhaps they will sit together for a month, so she did not want to spoil the relationship. I'm sorry. It had been a rough day. They had to do 2 mom's C-sections, and it was hard to control the process. First time doing a C-section. Victoria was confused by the question. Did the girl doubt her qualifications? She probably just misunderstood her. Oh, just kidding. Don't worry about it. I get tired of my job every time. I take it you're a midwife. Yes, Vika answered with interest. And you're a gynecologist for teenagers. You don't know how hard it is with them. I love children, but they are so shy. Every time I have to pull out of them words, as if obstetrician them with forceps. Still with a smile. The neighbor said, "Oh, I didn't even introduce myself." Samantha Brown introduced herself and raised her hand for a handshake. Victoria Wilson is an obstetrician gynecologist, responded to the girl's handshake, as Samantha formally mouthed her name, laughing. The girls exchanged phone numbers and said goodbye, agreeing to sit next to each other, and tomorrow. The new day passed unnoticed. Victoria didn't do anything special at work. Mostly she fiddled with documents and filled them out. The girl was very much looking forward to meeting her new acquaintance, Samantha. Therefore, as soon as the clock showed 7 o'clock, Vicky immediately closed the laptop and closed the office, rushed to the courses. They were held not far from the maternity hospital where she worked. She only had to walk 1 block. But unfortunately, it started to rain heavily, and Vicky had nothing to cover herself with. However, before she could walk a couple of meters, an umbrella suddenly formed over her head, followed by the person holding the umbrella. It was Samantha. Victoria marveled at her sudden appearance. How did she end up here? Victoria wondered. I work nearby in that hospital over there, the girl said. She pointed to the northeast. So that's the neighboring building of the clinic where I work. So we're not just desk neighbors, said the girl with a wink, to which she got the same smirk in return. Victoria was still surprised that they had been working next to each other all this time and had never met once. She was enjoying this girl's company more and more. After the seminar, her new friend suggested going to a cafe. After all, tomorrow was already Sunday. Of course, the job of a teenage gynecologist was easier than that of a doctor of midwifery. They had the weekend off, unlike Victoria. However, Vicky accepted the invitation because there were no grand plans for Sunday, no labor and delivery surgery, or meeting a new client. All she had to do was fill out paperwork on the computer over and over again, which she absolutely did not want to do. And a cup of coffee with a friend was the perfect excuse to take the day off. Hi, Vicky said hello, sitting down at the table across from her friend. How long have you been waiting for me? She asked, noticing half-drunk and a cup of coffee. Hi, darling. I wasn't particularly thirsty, and the drink had already been served. I'm sorry. Apology accepted, Victoria said with a smile. In the beginning, the dialogue was not at all formed, and it was very awkward. The girls discussed work, the weather, and each other's well-being. However, the conversation became more sincere when the conversation turned to the topic of family. But Vicky suspected that someday their chatter would reach this sensitive topic, so she was prepared for this outcome. So what did we find out? That you like kids. In a good way, Samantha joked, making their time together more relaxed. And you have kids of your own. Or maybe you're planning to. Victoria decided not to rush her answer. She slowly raised the coffee mug to her lips and took a sip, trying to ignore Samantha's eager gaze. There are no children. More accurately muled, the girl said. I'm infertile. That's why I can't even think about having a family. Firmly, she said. She saw Samantha's look of dying embarrassment. However, her friend immediately corrected herself. What about the kids from the orphanage? Or have you always dreamed only of your own children? Are you afraid you won't love them as much as you would if you had your own? I thought about it, but I can't bring them up alone. I can't cope. And my personal life has been a little strained so far too. Oh, come on. You can do it on your own. I haven't seen my husband in 2 months. He's on a ship that sails around the Japanese islands. And when we see each other, we don't see each other much either. I've got work. He's got things to do. So I do all the household chores myself. And we have 3 dogs. Of course, I understand that they cannot be compared with children. But children, although you will be there at 6 o'clock, but not often ask you to go for a walk with them right away. Otherwise, they wet the hallway or slippers, Samantha said, laughing. So all the care of these little creatures rests on my fragile female shoulders, summarized the girl, taking another sip of fresh emergency coffee. Do you have pets too? Victoria answered enthusiastically. I have a puppy, and he's always asking to go for walks. Samantha, I suggest we walk our pets together. That's a great idea. Vic, where do you live again? Harbor Front, Harbor Point. So you're right downtown. Good for you. My husband and I would need at least 5 years to get a small mortgage on a small apartment. However, I do live close to you. Do you know Young Street? Sure. I walk in the park, and I come out on that street. That's the park. Victoria, we definitely found each other. And from that meeting, the girls bonded. Samantha was only 2 years younger than Victoria, so they didn't feel any age difference. The girls became the closest of friends and did almost everything together. They left work, walked their pets, and often went to visit each other. Once they baked cookies together, which burned, and they laughed about the story for a long time. And Victoria was happier than ever. She used to think she had tons of friends until she met Samantha. She was someone with whom you could share all your problems, knowing that you wouldn't be judged, understood, and supported. In turn, Vicky listened attentively to her friend's worries about her relationship. It turns out that the girl was always worried about the distance between her and her husband, and although almost always managed to hide it, the mask could not be worn forever, and the girl snapped. Since childhood, she dreamed of a family and a cozy home full of love. However, when her husband was sent to serve in the East, their lives changed dramatically. All of Alexandra's promises that they would always be in touch turned to dust. He found himself more and more occupied with his work and less thinking about his wife, who had waited obediently for him for the 2 years they had been married. It was killing him. Samantha was pushing her from the inside out. Though she didn't show it, she felt bad, and Victoria tried with all her might to distract the girl from her unsightly plight. And she was succeeding. Until one unfortunate day that broke Samantha. Nothing unusual had happened that day. Both girls were doing their work, and in the evening they planned to go for a walk, walking down the streets and flying ice cream. They were making plans for tomorrow. However, their fun conversation was interrupted by a phone call. Samantha picked up the phone and moved a little away from her friend, holding her ice cream in her hands with a smile. The girl answered it. She didn't utter a word further. However, by her facial expression, which was gloomier and gloomier with every second, Victoria realized something was wrong. She didn't dare to approach her friend until she dropped the ice cream cone and then collapsed on the pavement. Victoria ran over, snatched the phone from her, which her friend was barely holding, and squatted down in front of her. Samantha didn't even lift her head. When Vika took matters into her own hands and forced her friend to look at her, cupping her cheeks with her hands. It was a look she remembered for a long time. The completely glassy look of a devastated person. It was as if her friend was looking through her. Suddenly, the girl's eyes ran out, and she lost consciousness. Victoria barely had time to pick the girl up before her head collided with the hot sidewalk. It was only now that the midwife noticed that a circle of people had formed around them, as if it was some kind of show. There are men here to help me. She turned to the crowd. Only one man came out to answer her question. A boy in his 20s. Pretty pumped up, though. And that could easily be seen in his muscular build, highlighting, rushing underneath a snow-white t-shirt. Pick her up and help me carry her to the car." "I'll call a cab now," the girl explained. The guy followed her instructions, and in 5 minutes Victoria was already riding in the car, and on her lap lay a friend, still unconscious. Vicky couldn't understand what it was that had shaken her so much. She was lost in speculation, but convinced herself that it was necessary to give her friend first aid, and then think about the causes of this terrible condition. The girl gave the cab driver her address and asked him to help her lift her friend to her floor. The cab driver was begging, but for an additional fee agreed. "But she's a Ms. Pinchuk too. Watch your girlfriend more carefully," the cab driver remarked as he led the girl up to the apartment. Victoria had no choice but to make a strained smile that screamed, "Get lost." The cab driver seemed to take the hint and departed, wishing the girl good night. Victoria, on the other hand, barely dragged her friend to the bed, and as soon as she put her to bed, she collapsed next to her. It turns out that to carry a drunken person, you need a good physical preparation. However, the girl lay only a few minutes, during which she gave herself a break before a new difficult task. "I had to at least get Samantha out of her jeans and get her comfortable. I pulled off my friend's shoes and jeans." The girl put her head on a soft pillow and covered her with a blanket, and then lay down next to her. The next morning, Victoria woke up with a terrible headache. She opened her phone and saw 30 missed calls from Lily, her fellow midwife. It was then that the girl realized how badly she had blundered. Plans had completely slipped her mind. Today, she had to be present at the hospital as early as 7 o'clock because Maria was going to come to them, who was going to give birth the other day, or rather to lie under the surgical knife, because she was going to have a C-section. Vika looked at the clock, which showed 11 o'clock in the afternoon. The horror. She might be fired. The girl got up in a flash and ran to the kitchen, where she saw Samantha sitting at the table. Her eyes were still staring into the void. She didn't even seem to notice her friend's presence. Samantha cautiously called out to the girl Victoria. Her friend turned around. The midwife again saw that same glassy stare of the shattered man. She decided to take a seat at the table and gently inquire what had happened. She was no longer worried about her job or the fact that she might get fired. Right now, she was only thinking about her condition and her friend who clearly needed help. The silence lasted a minute, and only Victoria was about to say something. Samantha gave it away. "He's dead." Quietly, almost in a whisper, the girl said, "My husband, he's dead." Victoria was stunned by this news. Her eyes rounded and her breathing became very heavy. She realized why her friend looked like a corpse. Alexander had died. Those words like a bullet van get into Victoria over and over again. He was the only person who, though far away, mentally supported Samantha. She clung to him like a lifeline. He was very close to her, and the only person who truly loved her deeply and for a long time. And not even distance could break their soul connection. "Samantha, I'm so sorry." But her friend didn't seem to be listening to Victoria at all. "I feel sick." Suddenly, the girl blurted out and rushed to the bathroom. Victoria heard the sounds of vomiting. This news really hit her hard. Tonight she had fainted. Today she threw up. The midwife realized that she was now responsible for her friend's condition, both physically and mentally. "I'm sorry, it's very embarrassing." "I in your apartment," began to apologize girl, returning to the table on the move, rubbing her chin, which she washed with water. "Nothing." Victoria nodded understandingly. She felt sorry for the girl, but she was a midwife, not a psychologist, and didn't know what was best to say in situations like this. She didn't want to hurt or make it any worse, so breakfast passed in silence. When Samantha got ready, all in the same silence, Victoria stopped her in the hallway. "You don't want to talk right now, I understand. However, remember that you can always turn to me for support. I'm here for you." "Thank you, Vika. You're my only comfort. I love you," the girl replied, hugged her friend and left the apartment, leaving behind her the condensed smell of her favorite perfume. "Where have you been?" shouted Lily, all the time catching up with Victoria, as she was walking very fast, almost running. I'm not going to discuss this with you. Lily, I'm drawing the whole situation to the head doctor. If you want, you can eavesdrop outside the door. Just be careful, or the adults might scold you. Victoria answered wryly. She had never liked Lilia as a person. She was very slippery and dodgy and cunning, and she was always eager to listen to gossip or to start a ridiculous rumor herself. The midwife didn't trust her with any secret or news, because in an hour the whole hospital, or even worse, the whole neighborhood, would know about it. You've been rougher than usual today. I'm prepared to be rude to you. Always, my dear, but not in front of my clients, Victoria said, pointing to several girls who were sitting in the waiting room waiting for their paperwork to be done at the front desk. Very soon, they won't be yours anymore, Vic, the girl said meaningfully and walked away in the opposite direction. Lilia and Victoria had always been work rivals. They were both doctors of the highest category of obstetrician. However, Lilia differed in that she mostly delivered babies. Whatever Victoria did, who was a step higher and only supervised everyone in a separate ward. And about them, there were always disputes, who was the best and who really should be in charge in the maternity ward. And so Victoria had punctured herself and the clients were served by Lily, which Vike was not at all happy about. She was furious. She was afraid she was really going to lose her place. However, that morning, no matter how it was, circumstances demanded that she did not show up for work at the proper time. The girl simply couldn't leave her friend alone. Her conscience would have tormented her. For now, however, Samantha had the excuse of absence from work. Victoria did not have one, and in her heart she hoped that the head doctor took pity on her and would understand the situation. So you missed your work shift without answering the phone or even notifying your superiors to support your friend. Yes, ma'am, that's exactly how Victoria responded. Are we in kindergarten? Raised her voice the head of the department. Madam, I am a qualified specialist, and so you think that now you can come to work whenever you want. There was silence in the office. Victoria did not know what to answer such a nasty question. Victoria started as a doctor. I will not fire you, however. I have to punish you. You will lose all the female clients who wanted to sign up with you this month, and you must also pay a fine of $50,000. The midwife was shocked at the turn of events. She'll pay the money. It had never been a problem for her, but that's not what bothered her. She resented being humiliated for one mistake. She would rather be fired than have the girls she really wanted to work with taken away. She wondered who would serve her customers in this case, to which she received Lily's cruel and annoying answer. She has the same qualifications as you, so she could very well be promoted to the role of Dr. Midwife. Are you saying you understand me? Yes, Victoria, I understand. Our clinic needs doctors who are punctual and responsible, and if everyone does what you do, our hospital won't be considered one of the best in Toronto. But I've only missed work once. So why the cruel punishment? Doesn't 10 years of continuous service count for something? I don't want to talk to you like a schoolgirl, Victoria. And that's exactly what you're doing right now. Unless you want to make things worse. Accept these new conditions and live in peace. Victoria once again gave the head doctor an indignant look. She couldn't even imagine that such a minor slip would remove her from her position as the leading obstetrician doctor, the position she had worked in for the past 5 years. As she walked out of the office, the girl saw Lily standing on the right side of the door. Apparently, the advice to eavesdrop on the conversation this girl had taken literally. And only then did Victoria realize that Lily must have already known everything. After all, who else but her had ratted out to the head doctor of the department that the employee wasn't at work? It was dishonest, mean, and nasty. But there was nothing the midwife could do about it. And, ignoring Lily's defeated looks, she merged into her office. In the evening, Vike tried to call herself, but her friend did not pick up the phone. And the girl concluded that the last thing Sam wanted to hear was platitudes about how everything would be fine and everything would work out. The girl hoped that her friend was fine, and she just turned off her phone. However, the anxiety did not go anywhere, but still Victoria decided to go to bed. The next working day surprised the girl even more. To be more precise, she was impressed by her friend's courage. "Victoria, you are our host again, Dr. Obstetrician, but please do not be late for work, and do not bother me for nothing." Quickly, the head doctor prepared the apparatus. Barely opening the door of Victoria's office, the girl didn't even see her face. Of course, she was amazed and delighted by this news, and in a minute she was already running around the department, trying to find answers. "Why?" she asked loudly, peering into the head doctor's office. "Why did you change your mind?" When the door opened fully, the girl saw someone she absolutely did not expect to see in this building. It was Samantha. Her friend smiled at her and got up from her chair. "Thank you, ma'am. I'm glad we understood each other." And the girl walked towards the exit of the office, towards the shocked and Victoria. "Why did you do that?" asked Victoria. As they walked down the hall, "You helped me, and after hearing about your problem, I decided to return the favor. We went to school together. You didn't know. She owed me something." Samantha smiled slyly. The girls entered Vicky's office. Vicky settled into the desk, and Samantha nestled us into the client chair. "But that wasn't my goal from the beginning," her friend continued. "I came to the hospital to give you some news, but I overheard from the staff that you'd been demoted, so I decided to find out why. And as you can see, it was not in vain." Victoria seemed to have missed the whole rant. What news? There was silence in the office. It was obvious that Samantha was gathering her courage to announce something very important. Otherwise, she wouldn't have come to the hospital during working hours and in this condition. "I'm pregnant, Vicky." Victoria glanced at her friend and sank further into the chair. So it pitifully scripted the pool. She had expected everything. That Alexander had survived or Samantha had been informed where to pick up his body. However, this took her by surprise. She couldn't have even imagined such an outcome. And of course, she felt even more sympathy for Samantha, who had so many problems dumped on her in an instant. She wanted to hug the girl, to support her. However, she only said it aloud. "What's the time limit?" 2 months. Samantha said. "I haven't seen Alexander for exactly 2 months." As if anticipating the next question, the girl added, "I mean, yes, it's his child. But I'm not here to listen to tearful speeches and sympathy for my loss." Victoria quietly sighed in relief. She really wanted to support her friend. However, now, after so many events, the girl could only listen to her. "I came here," Samantha continued, "to ask you to be my doctor. I want you to manage the pregnancy from start to finish." However, seeing Victoria's eyes, which were rounding more and more with every second, the pal added, "You're my friend, and I'll be quiet." Vika stopped her. She went to her friend, hugged her tightly, and allowed herself to let a tear fall. "I'll do anything for you, Samantha." 2 months passed. The girls grew even closer. Victoria helped herself as much as she could. An ultrasound revealed that Samantha was expecting twins. Finally, it was time to find out the sex of the babies. Victoria offered her friends to make a gender party where they would find out in a solemn atmosphere. Samantha, however, refused. She still couldn't accept her husband's death. She didn't want to have any celebrations without him. They had planned to do everything together, but their whole life had collapsed in an instant, and the girl couldn't afford to party without him just yet. And of course, this holiday was unlikely to end in bright, hearty laughter. Samantha had frequent breakdowns, and she wouldn't be able to contain herself after finding out the sex of her babies. "Okay, you're all set. You can lie down." The midwife invited Samantha onto the couch. She smeared the girl's belly with special helium and began to drive the probe at the same time. Looking at the screen where the picture was coming up, "Are you ready, Sam?" Victoria asked. Her friend looked at her joyfully. However, in that look there was not only happiness, but also the bitterness of the loss of the treaty. "Not a shadow. You have twin boys. Boys." Samantha screamed with happiness and asked her friend to print out their pictures. She was out of her mind. Joy overwhelmed her. It truly was a miracle. Months went by. Each day brought the incredible joy of impending motherhood. Victoria helped the girl set up the baby's room. They bought a crib and many different accessories. Vicky even helped her friend with money. And finally, the day of labor came. Okay, I'll say it again. Contractions are normal. Your water broke, and they're taking you to a private room, Victoria told her friend, as she was wheeled down the hall on a couch with wheels. Push, push, shouted midwife Lily, pulling out the first and then the second baby. Finally, Samantha was relieved. Victoria picked up the twins and placed them on her mother's chest. After what seemed like a minute, however, the machine abruptly replaced. All the doctors in the room fussed. Her blood pressure is dropping, shouted excited voices. She's lost too much blood. Give me the medication. Sarah, there was panic. In this chaos, Samantha tugged Valerie, who had been by Vicky's side the whole time, by the forearm. I'm losing consciousness. Please, under no circumstances, give them to my parents. Promise me that you will take care of them, please. I beg you, don't give them to my parents. You don't know what they're like. Victoria was horrified by what was happening. She'd never had a patient die before. And now why? Why did it have to be her only friend? But that wasn't what was required of her right now. And Victoria, though she was ready to panic, gathered all her will into a fist and answered with a firm grip on her friend's palm. I promise they'll be in good hands. As soon as Vicky uttered that short phrase, Samantha cut her off, rushed to pump, and carried the twins to safety. Heartbeat. The rhythm is weak, but steady. Looks like she's slipped into a coma. Lily's fait accompli was brutally stated. A month passed. Samantha was still in a coma. All the while, Victoria felt devastated. She went to work like a zombie. She came back from it in exactly the same condition. 2 weeks ago, however, she had an idea. It was crazy and terrifying, and Victoria had little faith in the success of this operation. However, she was willing to commit for her friend. She looks like a baby. Yes, it was certainly a crime. But the girl simply saw no other way out. Victoria quickly found buyers for 2 apartments, which she had her own and inherited from her mother, and at a very similar price. On the night of April 5, when it was exactly 1 month since the birth of the kids, the girl began to take active steps. To begin with, Victoria stayed at work at night, substituting someone who turned up by the way. This time was enough for her to find birth certificates and forged documents. She put her name in the mother's column, and she was able to do it because she had access to the documentation. And even here, Samantha helped her. After all, if her friend hadn't persuaded the head doctor to leave Vika's position as a physician midwife, she wouldn't be as omnipotent as she was now. She was in charge of all the baby-related paperwork that saw the light of day at this clinic, and that played to her advantage. The guards' guests had coffee with Irish liquor, which was very tasty. However, with a strong sleeping pill, the girl was able to free herself for a few hours by swiping her card on the electronic lock that closed the doors leading to the room with an oxygen box. She entered the room and looked for the children who were signed as Samantha Brown. Once she found them, she carefully dressed each sleeping baby, covered their faces with oxygen masks, and placed them in the double stroller. Now she was left with the single most difficult task of the night: to get out of the hospital. She had no hope of going completely unnoticed. She only prayed to God that the guard at the main entrance would notice her a minute later, when she could get into a cab. And he did, walking with a smirk. The guard at the building's exit asked. The girl answered with a hesitant nod and left the hospital as quickly as possible. As Victoria had expected, the guard stirred up the whole place later. While she was getting into a cab, the big man jumped out of the building and ran towards her, shouting, "You don't have children." Victoria, stop. What are you doing? But Vika ignored the screams. She was driven by excitement. She had it all worked out. But that was only the beginning of the plan. Now, while the sleepy cab driver took the girl to the place where her car was waiting for them, Victoria's main goal was to get away quickly and quietly so that the police and the others would wake up. already later, paying the cab driver twice as much, hoping that he wouldn't blab about the incident, which was unlikely because he didn't seem to care about anything. Victoria escorted the car out with a glance and made sure the man was gone. She opened the lane that her BMW had covered. Her faithful dog Aaron was already waiting there. And the twins were still sleeping peacefully as well. No amount of chasing could wake them up, it seemed. Carefully putting them in the already prepared sleeping places, Victoria got behind the wheel. Beside her sat her pet. They looked like a gang from a gangster movie. The partner, of course, was Aaron, laughing a little at their thought. The girl backed up, turned around, and drove down the highway, picking up speed with each passing second. Her path lay to the airport. Standing at the checkpoint, the girl was very nervous. However, she was reassured by the fact that she looked like the truest mother. "So they are a month old?" the customs official asked sternly. "Yes, sir," replied Victoria. The girl did not give any further comments, afraid to say anything unnecessary. "And for what purpose are you going to Istanbul?" "My friend and I had an agreement that when my babies are a month old, I will visit her in Istanbul to show her my younger ones. I mean, a visit to a friend." The officer made a disgruntled grimace. However, when he looked at the documents, a faint smile appeared on his face. "Have a good trip, Mrs. Wilson." The girl gave him a smile, and as soon as she crossed the line, she exhaled a sigh of relief. He called her Mrs. A new one was beginning. The head in her life is happy, much happier than before, and she's ready for this change. "So, kids, this is our new apartment for the next 18 years, declared Vika when she was finally given the keys to the apartment. The property Victoria had purchased here was very spacious. 4 bedrooms, a huge kitchen adjacent to the living room, and of course, a panoramic view of Istanbul. Another window on the opposite side of the apartment overlooked the Bosphorus Strait. She had chosen this city for many reasons. First, this country needed highly skilled doctors. Secondly, the warm climate that Victoria loved so much was excellent here. Well, of course, and Istanbul, as the locals called it, was a very cozy and colorful city, which also added its own special charm by putting the children in the pre-prepared cribs, which she had asked to be placed in the nursery before she arrived. She turned on the TV and sat down on the couch as she suspected she would. The news channels were already buzzing about the stolen twins. It had been exactly 24 hours since her successful abduction. Given the time zones, and while everyone in Toronto was just waking up and listening to the horrifying news, Victoria was drinking delicious tea in her new apartment, and the bright afternoon sun was shining outside the window. "What, Sharon? It's about time we had a makeover," the girl said triumphantly. Of course, the change of appearance is not a quick thing. That's why Victoria only shaved off her long, thick hair and made herself a beautiful short bob, which was dyed black. So how can hair dramatically change the appearance? Vika was no longer at all like the former midwife from Toronto. Victoria went to Turkey for a reason. As a child, her mother often took her with her on business trips, and very often they lived in Istanbul. Therefore, young Vicky got language practice on the streets of this city. It was this city that she remembered most of all. She had always dreamed of living here, but her career took shape in Toronto, and she forgot her childhood dreams. Istanbul was teeming with tourists, and the population was over 14 million. It was easy to hide here from the police who were now looking for her. A couple months passed. Victoria found a job at the private memorial hospital. Of course, she didn't yet hold the position she had in Toronto. However, she could already boast of success at work. Canadian authorities were still looking for her, but never found her. Who would pay attention to a mother with 2 infants? There were 1 million of them in Istanbul, but sometimes people wondered who the father of these children was, to which Victoria replied that he had died tragically in a submarine, which was true. However, with one of the including circumstances, it was not her husband, and she did not even know what he looked like. But everyone doesn't need to know that. She did, however, often contemplate a drastic change in appearance. She could do a new hairstyle, a different makeup. But her facial features remained the same, and she needed to change that. And after a few months of living in Turkey, Victoria finally decided to take this step. Part of the money she received from the sale of her property and car, she invested in her face, her new beautiful face, which she really liked. She was no longer the ugly girl that no one wants to even meet. Now she was a beautiful Turk. Straight nose, high cheekbones, bushy eyebrows, eyes almost black from her contact lenses, and her skin was already naturally swarthy. And now she was already a heroine of Turkish TV series. Now all men looked at her as she walked along the streets of the city. Many wanted to talk to her, but so far she did not risk her position, because at any moment she could be twisted. Even though she had changed her appearance, she had lived like this for several years. Her quiet and happy life as a single mother brought her nothing but pleasure. Over the years, she was able to rise to the position of lead obstetrician and was again in charge of the department. She improved her skills in Turkish, and it was hard to distinguish her from a native speaker. The boys she named Michael and Joseph. These two names carried a certain value to her. Her favorite uncle's name was Michael, and Joseph was her father, who died tragically in a car accident. The boys grew up well-mannered, obedient. The woman always loved children, so she knew how to bring them up. They spoke English and Turkish equally fluently and correctly. This was the year they were to go to school, and even though the children were bilingual, Victoria decided to send them to a school for foreigners where the instruction was in English. She hoped that her children would want to travel, and for that they would definitely need well-practiced English, the world's premier international language. All the paperwork is in the rehabilitation department. The nurse mumbled and left the office. Victoria had no choice but to follow them. Passing by one of the wards in the doorway, she noticed a handsome man and for some reason decided to look in. She herself did not know what the motive for this action was, but she was instinctively drawn to the door. He was a pumped-up brunette. You could tell by the muscles that peeked out from beneath the hospital pajamas that barely covered his strong body. He had a scar on his very temple. With his hand, he clutched and squeezed the rubber bands that were tied to each of his fingers. He clenched his fist and clenched it again. And these simple actions completed Victoria with their beauty. Then Victoria saw the coach who had been making remarks to this match all this time. And suddenly, the man's gaze met the girl's eyes. She immediately closed the door and, shy as a schoolgirl, wandered down the corridor further, not understanding why this man caused such feelings in her. It was a couple of days after the incident and Victoria was back in the office. She had to sign some papers at the front desk. But deep down, she secretly hoped to meet that handsome man. And her wish came true. While she was signing another document at the counter, this stranger came over and stood next to Vicky. She pretended not to notice him, but tried to hide a smile. Well, the man took a ride. And you work here. The woman still pretended to be very busy and scrutinized the documents. And only for a moment, throwing a glance at him, said yes, with. And again she went deep into the study of papers. However, that fleeting glance of his beautiful blue eyes was enough to make the girl's heart beat frequently. She was even afraid that this knocking was too loud and ran away, citing urgent matters. In the following days, the girl began to visit the rehabilitation units more and more often. Always called to pick up some papers or help, although it was not part of her duties. "Vike, why did you like him so much?" asked a girl at the front desk. Since they saw each other almost every day, they could already be called friends. However, Victoria did not allow any close connection. She was broken after her friendship with Samantha had been tragically cut short. "I'm sorry, but it's impossible not to notice the way you look at him, especially since you've started showing up here every day. Even though your department is in a completely different wing of the hospital, it's so noticeable." The midwife's getting very excited. "No, I'm the only one who's noticed so far." "Well, maybe he has," the girl said, allowing herself a chuckle. Victoria didn't understand why she was giggling at first. However, Following her gaze, she turned around and saw his man, her dream man. She had already recognized the fact that she was indeed head over heels in love with him, even though she didn't even know his name. The girl was very embarrassed when their eyes met and immediately turned away. "Why didn't you say so?" Vicky whispered fiercely to her friend in the ward. "Oh, I can't believe you two are so funny." The SHA receptionist also quietly replied to her. Victoria gave her a judgmental look. Only she had the right to judge whether they were funny or not. Though no, it was already like a teenage crush in high school. "Okay, I can help," the girl offered. "But I'm not a matchmaker. I'll just tell you what I know. Would you like that?" "Of course I do," Victoria agreed, and apparently too loudly, because some of the customers turned to look at her. "Yes, more quietly," the girl said. "His name is Antonio. He's been in rehab with us for a month now. He had one foot amputated. No one knows why. But all our nurses are very eager to find out what terrible thing happened in his life." "What nurses?" "Oh, you're not the only one looking to be his girlfriend. He's handsome. That's a fact. And his lack of limbs doesn't interfere with his other physiological abilities. If you know what I'm talking about," said the girl with a wink. "What a naughty Susie you are. Anyway, I suggest you act quickly. Otherwise, this half-god will be taken away." Victoria was confused by the new details. First of all, she finally knew the name of her lover, but she was outraged by the boldness of the nurses. Once again signing the papers, she dragged them to the labor and delivery room a moment later, and all the papers were on the floor. "Oh dear, I'm sorry. Please excuse me. I didn't see you," spoke a deep, low voice. Vicky looked at the man and almost fainted. It was Antonio. His sky-blue eyes were looking straight at her. She could barely breathe. "It was my own fault. I didn't look where I was going. Maybe I could apologize to you over a nice cup of coffee." This divine man offered coffee. The girl hesitantly interjected, "There's a wonderful coffee shop up ahead. I thought you worked at that hospital. You've never been there." The woman did not explain to him that she worked in a completely different department and that she came here only for him. "But when I realized it was a chance, I just said, 'Sure, I'm on my lunch break.'" And then he started rocking back and forth to keep his balance. With a laugh, Antonio finished his story. Victoria had been laughing nonstop for about 20 minutes. She didn't think their dialogue could be so amazingly serene. It had been since their first date. Or rather, not really a date, since they were just having coffee in the clinic's coffee shop and eating. To the girl, however, this meeting seemed exactly like a romantic date. Such coffee breaks began to happen more and more often. And the day came when he invited her to have dinner in a restaurant instead of a coffee shop, arguing that he wanted to diversify his boring hospital life. But of course, Victoria realized that this was the real date she had been waiting for. They started going out together on weekends, eating ice cream, watching sunsets of the strait, and Vicky felt like she had finally found love, true love, mutual love. She introduced him to her children, with whom Antonio immediately found a common language and her expectation of real family happiness. It finally came true. Already after 2 months of such dates and meetings, the man of her dreams made her an offer. Their wedding was to take place at the end of the month. Victoria very responsibly approached this event. Most of the time she chose the wedding dress and set the very image of the bride. And all other matters were handled by Antonio. He was well provided for after his military service, and though Victoria never got to know his past because it was a very sore subject for him, she was happy to be close to such a wonderful man who she loved and who loved her. The wedding was modest by the standards of Istanbul. It was attended only by her closest family and friends, if they could be called that, but rather buddies and co-workers. Yes, Victoria's children. However, it was a really decent, good wedding of two people in love with each other. Antonio accepted her children as his own and began to raise them, as well as Vicky did. They were wonderful parents and a very friendly family with love and comfort and peace. However, their happiness did not last long. On one of the usual unremarkable days, our couple noticed that they were being watched. Nothing special seemed to be happening. However, the unpleasant feeling that they were not alone did not leave them for a minute. Their car was always followed by another car with different license plates, but always black and with tinted windows. Cautious footsteps were heard behind them, and suspicious figures crouched near the entrance of the house where they lived. They forbade the children to go out, to walk later than 9:00 p.m. That was the time it was starting to get dark. Victoria thought it was already paranoia. She never told her husband about her past, nor did he about his. He didn't know anything about her children or where she was from, so she was really quite worried about this surveillance. What if the authorities had found her after all? But was that possible after all these quiet years? It seemed unthinkable. Antonio reassured her that she was probably just stressed out at work. That's why it seemed absurd. 2 days later, however, their worst fears were confirmed. Victoria was making cookies in the kitchen with the children, as suddenly rang the doorbell. Most likely, it was Antonio who came from a walk with the dog and forgot his keys. Vicky thought, Joseph Sonny would be kind enough to open the door for Daddy, because I have all my hands in the dough, asked the woman. The boy under the squabbles ran to the door to finally meet his father from his walk. He didn't take the children with him, because the boys were a little sick, and Joseph had already missed his father. But when the little boy opened the door, he was very surprised. Behind it stood a man in a black cap and a black strict suit. It was not his father. The man seemed strange to the boy. It was rare to see people wearing such clothes in Istanbul in summer. Mom, can you come here? Joseph called out to his mother. Victoria was a little annoyed because she had to wash her hands urgently from the dough that had flown in. She left Michael to keep an eye on the spiritual and herself headed to her son's call. Yes, son, what's wrong? However, all questions instantly fell away when she saw the man in the suit. She knew it was the end. She had been found, but she kept her nerve and dared to speak to the stranger first. Good afternoon. Did you want something? Strictly asked Vika, putting her arm around her son's shoulders as if to let him know I'm with you. Are you safe? Victoria Wilson. Yes. Mr. Jerry Smith, private investigator. May I come in? Without waiting for an answer, the man thought he'd been let in and tried to walk over the threshold. But Victoria stopped him. No, I won't. Not until you tell me the purpose of your visit, the woman said in a stern tone. I'm here on Samantha Brown's case. Do you know her? Vike almost fainted. She felt dizzy and nauseous. She tried to keep her balance and spoke quickly. Please come in. Victoria led the man into the living room and asked the boys to stay in their rooms. This was a conversation they definitely didn't need to hear. But most of all, she was worried about her husband. If he found out, it would be a disaster. It turns out she had been lying to him all along. The girl put the unexpected guest on the sofa and offered him tea or something stronger, but received a polite refusal. Then the woman took a soft drink from the bar and poured it into a glass. I'm listening to you carefully, Victoria said, sinking down on the sofa. I understand that you are aware of the situation, and there is no point in explaining anything to you. Victoria understood perfectly well what was going on, but she had no idea whose interests this man represented. If he's a private investigator, he's not working for the government. No, sir, I don't understand at all what you told Vicky to do. What did the man with his fingers crossed start? Well, let's start at the beginning. I'll repeat my question. Have you met Samantha Brown? The midwife decided not to be deceitful. Yes, or rather, I did at one time. Then I'm sure you know what we're going to be talking about. I'm a representative of an organization that specializes in finding missing people. 3 years ago, an elderly couple came to me asking for my help, and I couldn't say no. They were Samantha Brown's parents, who had been searching for their kidnapped grandchildren for years. They had lost all hope of success. However, as I said, I'm a private detective, and it's my specialty to deal with such matters. The detective changed his posture and put one foot on the other. At that moment, Victoria heard footsteps. Vicky called out to the shocked and husbandwoman. "Who is it? Where are the children?" Victoria took a deep breath. She realized that she was about to have a tough conversation. It would most likely be followed by yelling and relationship proceedings. She was ready. "Children in their rooms, dear, as a private detective. Sit down and try to calmly absorb the situation." Antonio nervously sat down on the couch and began to examine the man as if it was his wife's lover. When he realized that this man was really who he said he was, he nodded and signaled for the detective to begin his speech. "I take it you're her husband, but it doesn't matter. I'll continue. An unfortunate mother fell into a coma after giving birth 8 years ago. A month afterward, her newborn twin babies were abducted." The man emphasized the last word in his voice. "Police and authorities tried for a long time to find the kidnapper, but without success. After a year, the poor mother woke up and regained consciousness. Her parents began an active search for their grandchildren, which again led to a deplorable result. Then they decided to turn to me, and I was finally able to complete this terribly difficult and confusing case. Sir, wait, I'm sorry, but I don't understand how my wife and I fit into this whole story. And what are you doing in my house?" "Mr. Wilson, I was hoping your wife would share her past history with you, but obviously, I'm going to have to do it for her now. No doubt this will be doubly painful for you. But Ms. Wilson has made her own choice." Victoria looked at the detective with a pleading look, but he was adamant. "Does the name Samantha Brown mean anything to you?" The detective asked her husband. Antonio's heart beat more frequently, and his breathing began to be interrupted. He hadn't heard that name in a very long time, and thought he would never hear it again. "I take it you haven't told your wife anything either." The man in the black suit continued in a sarcastic tone. "You two make a nice couple. You're just like Mrs. and Mrs. Smith. Exactly the same. Only the backstory's different." Mockingly, he added, "Well, I'll shed some light on each other's dark secrets for you, and hopefully there won't be a bitter war here afterward. Remember that there are children in the house." The couple looked at each other puzzled. Their eyes read questions and fear of being bothered. "So, Victoria, let's start with you. First, and I think the most important thing you should know about your husband is his real name. Your Antonio is not Antonio. He changed his name. His name used to be Alexander, and he is the legal husband of your old friend Samantha Brown. Yes, you knew he was dead, I understand, but he survived that terrible explosion. Why do you think he had to have his foot amputated?" Victoria's eyes were filled with horror. She was in shock. She couldn't get her head around the information she'd received. Her husband is also the husband of her best friend, whom she thought was dead. Her husband is alive. But 8 years ago, they were told he died in a submarine. And it's good for you, Antonio, or as we've already established, Alexander, to know that the children you thought were her birth children are your and Samantha's babies. Victoria was the kidnapper. She was the one who snatched them that night. It was her request. She asked me to do it, Victoria shouted back. Alexander was also shocked by more and more facts. Not only had his wife been lying to him all along, but his ex-wife, whom he thought had died in childbirth, turned out to be alive and well, and still his legally documented spouse. The man looked at Victoria down the cheek of his beloved, and slowly a lone tear rolled down. Today they had both learned things about each other, something they should have never learned. It was supposed to be in the past forever. But it seems life likes to throw in unexpected surprises. I guess you have a lot to think about now. The trial in this case is scheduled for next Monday, 1 week exactly. Don't try to escape or do anything. You've already been found, and now you're nowhere to be found. Especially you, Victoria. We will find you, and we will find you quickly, wherever you are in the world. And one more small clarification. With a sneer, said the detective, I was about to leave this apartment. I forgot to tell you that both of you are under house arrest and the apartments are under 24-hour surveillance. But why didn't Samantha find me in that time? Why didn't she tell me she was out of her coma? Asked Vike in the slightest of tones, seeing off the man who had just ripped her life to shreds. That sweetheart, I can't know for sure, but think for yourself, who would want to be nice to the kidnappers of their own children? But I didn't visit them. The woman cried out. That's what you'll prove in court the rest of the day. I think I've made a difference in your relationship. You bastard, whispered Victoria. You will. Explain to me what that was all about, said the man as the door closed behind the sudden visitor. First, you explain to me how the hell you ended up alive. No, I'm serious. How the hell did you survive? Samantha said you exploded in a submarine. You'd think, wouldn't you? It's my fault I survived that horrible day. Alexander started screaming. I was picked up by a Japanese ship. Already calmer, he said, seeing his wife's frightened eyes. I had to have my feet amputated and was treated for a long time. But I am alive. I tried to contact Samantha for a long time, but because of my illness, it was very difficult to do so. I couldn't even remember who I was or where I was. But then a chance came up, and I went to Toronto, my hometown. I immediately went to see Samantha, my wife. However, her parents, who had always been horrible tyrants and despots, told me that she had passed away in childbirth and the baby had not survived either. And then, to forget my grief, I started traveling the world and stopped in Istanbul, where I met you. Sadly, said the man and looked sorrowfully and piercingly. Oh my God. It was all Victoria could say. Vicky, I'm sorry, but I need to be alone. Don't wait up for me tonight. I'll get a hotel room. Tell our children I love them. All this means the end. Victoria screamed in rage. Now you lay me my children. They are only your children now. They've always been mine, and you. You have nothing to do with them. Angrily said the man. And with those words he slammed the front door loudly. Victoria almost collapsed on the couch and hid her head in her hands. She wanted to sob, wanted to throw herself out of the window, but she realized she would do none of that. Her boys were here, and they needed her. She needed to resolve the situation she had created as soon as possible. Would she never be able to be happy? The man she loved more than life turned out to be the husband, her best friend, and the father of her children. To think she had turned that thought in her head many times and couldn't find an explanation as to why life had been so cruel to her. She didn't deserve simple domestic bliss. And at one point, Victoria had an idea. She found the right phone number in an old notebook and dialed the number. The dial tone started ringing. You've reached Samantha Brown. Leave a message because I'm busy right now and can't take your call. The voice on the other end of the phone spoke, and the call went to voicemail. Vika hated it as much as she hated speaking words into a soulless mechanical void, leaving them unanswered. Today, however, she had no choice. Hello, Samantha. It's Victoria. Victoria Wilson. Your best friend. Ex-best friend. Victoria bitterly clarified. Call me back as soon as you can. I need to talk to you about something. The woman pressed reset. Now all she had to do was wait for the call. She looked up and saw Michael. Mom, where's that man? Why isn't Daddy here yet? Asked her son. Daddy is not coming today, dear. He was called to work. The girl lied. A tear rolled down her cheek. Mommy, are you crying? Concerned son asked. The distraught mother came running up. Did Daddy upset you? Yes. I'm sure he didn't mean to, Mom. It's gonna be okay. The woman cried. She never allowed herself to show weakness in the presence of children. However, today Victoria just couldn't hold back her tears. Michael leaned his head on his mother's shoulder. He felt very sorry for her, but he did not know how to help her. And Joseph is sleeping. After a while, Vike inquired, having calmed down a little. He always sleeps at 12 o'clock. You know that, smiled Michael. The girl gave her son a smile. Would she be deprived of these beautiful creatures that could make anyone happy on the worst day? She couldn't believe this was all happening to her. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare. But she realized that this was a cruel reality. A reality in which she would now have to live as she wandered aimlessly around the apartment. Vika looked at her phone. There was one notification reflected there. She had gotten voice messages. It didn't take a detective to realize it was Samantha. She pressed listen. Yeah, hi Victoria. I'm in Istanbul right now. I think I guessed that beautiful city. I suggest we meet tomorrow at 4:30 for coffee at the Mickey Mouse Family Cafe. That's the message. Samantha was not generous with words. Victoria realized that she was facing a difficult meeting that could surely affect the rest of her life. The next day, Vicky woke up very early. She could never sleep more than 6 o'clock, a doctor's habit. But after yesterday, which had turned her life upside down, she could barely sleep and only dozed off before dawn. So her head just split open. Antonio Alexander never came back, and she had no idea where he was. This day, she went from working all morning. She didn't know where to take herself. After making the kids breakfast and sending them off to school, she was left home all alone. Victoria turned on the TV and watched some endless series. She always did this when she was stressed. It was a kind of way to disconnect from the real world. It was 6 o'clock. The kids were already back from school. She fed them lunch and sent them off to do their homework. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. Finally, the clock struck 3 times, and Victoria was finally able to leave the house. The man in black loomed outside the house again, but he did not prevent her. Apparently, this meeting at the cafe was part of their overall plan. It was only a block away. Vicky waited all day for this meeting. However, when the time came, she was very reluctant to show up in the direction of the cafe. Arriving at the appointed time, she stirred a little in front of the entrance, but still, gathering all her will in a fist, opened the door. She saw her at once. She was wearing the same dress she had worn the first time she had come to the cafe in Toronto to get to know her better. How much had happened. Ever since then, she'd wanted to have a déjà vu effect. What did she manage to do? They hadn't seen each other in 8 years. Come to think of it, it looked like Samantha had decided to mess around or push Victoria's guilt by taking another deep breath. Vicky walked toward the table where her former friend was sitting. She looked emaciated and thin. It looked like a whole year in a coma had taken a very bad toll on her health. Suddenly, Victoria realized that her former friend wouldn't be able to recognize her now with a different face. "Hi, Sammy. It's me, Vicky," she said as warmly as possible as she approached the table. "Hi," said Samantha dryly. There was no emotion in her voice. There was silence between the girls again, just as there had been the first time. "I guess it wasn't just a suggestion to meet." Vicky broke the silence again. "Yeah, sorry, just getting my thoughts together." "You look different," the ex-girlfriend remarked. "Yeah, plastic surgery works wonders. It's probably how you seduced my husband. Why would you do that?" "It's not like you, Samantha. Things have changed since you stole my children." "I didn't steal them." "How dare you say that to me? When you asked me to take care of them and not give them to your parents. That was clearly an emotional thing to say, and you should have realized that. I didn't ask you to steal my children and run away with them. I gave birth to them through pain, still in shock after my husband's death. What did you do? You decided that you could take advantage of the situation so that they could be yours now. But darling, I'm going to upset you. I'm taking them back. There's a trial in 6 days, and it's sure to give me my babies back. So if you want to say goodbye to your babies properly, you have those 6 days. Samantha, how can you be so cruel? Think of the kids. They don't even know I'm not their birth mother. To them, you'll be just a strange auntie and nothing more. You can take the children, but you can't have their love now. That's none of your business, Victoria. I've said everything I have to say. This conversation is over." The woman stood up abruptly from the table, threw the bill on the table, and rushed for the exit, leaving Victoria behind. For 1 week, the week spun. She had only a week left in her mind to somehow solve the problems that had come upon her. When she got home, she saw her husband standing at the panned window drinking something from a tall glass. Vicky carefully approached him. "Isn't it a little early to be drinking?" The woman asked, pouring wine into her glass as well. "Under the circumstances, it is the right thing to do." The man said calmly, "Why didn't you tell me your real name? Even after we were married, I wanted to forget Vicky's past. I wanted to start a new life with you and the children. We have. Everything was great until that goddamn detective came in. I'm so tired of this nightmare." "I know, me too, Tony," said the girl, deliberately calling him by a name that wasn't her real name, because that's what she called him in their most intimate moments. It was a kind of supportive reminder of their love. The man walked over and hugged his wife. He didn't know what he should do, go back to his former spouse and take the children. However, according to the documents, he had nothing to do with them. After all, he was a different man now. Antonio Jorge, a different person. And their father died in a submarine 8 years ago, but he didn't want to leave his second wife. He was truly in love with her. He did not want to destroy this marriage and just had no idea how to get out of such a hopeless situation. It didn't take long for almost all the days he had marked to pass. Victoria never ventured to tell their children that she was not their birth mother. However, she and Alexander decided to tell them something that would explain why the court would be held on Sunday and why they would probably be taken away by some strange aunt. They made up a tale that she and Dad needed to leave immediately, and the kids might have to live with a foster mom. It happens. It's normal. They tried to indoctrinate their sons. At first, the boys rebelled. But after a while, they accepted the fact. Everyone in this house was now awaiting judgment, and everyone lived it in their own way. Victoria watched TV incessantly. Alexander drank and slept. And the children stopped doing their homework and played computer games all day long, feeling terrible stress. And finally, the day of the trial came. The trial was held in Toronto, as both Victoria and Alexander were still Canadian citizens. They were escorted to the trial by police officers who had arrived for that purpose. There was silence in the hall. The judge's stern voice interrupted the noise and conversation. "Based on all of the above circumstances, my colleagues and I have reached a decision. The court sentences Victoria Wilson to 15 years imprisonment under the articles kidnapping of a child, as well as obstruction of lawful actions of the authorities and forgery of documents. The children remain with their birth, father and biological mother Alexander and Samantha Brown." The room erupted in cheers and boos. Many were shocked by the judge's decision to separate the children, and the mother who raised them for 8 years was a crime in itself, thought many people who knew Victoria well previously. In the hall again heard the banging of the judge's gavel, and everyone could appeal against the court's decision can be filed in 2 months. Until then, the guilty will be taken into custody. Alexander looked for his beloved Victoria with his eyes. However, when he saw that she was twisted by 2 officers and led to the exit, he almost burst into tears. He only had time to see her devastation, sighting the sight of a man who had lost all hope on his shoulder. Someone's light hand lay on his shoulder. Turning around, he saw Samantha holding their children's hands. "It's time for us to go home, dear," the woman declared. The first month with his new family dragged tediously for Alexander. He and the children moved into Samantha's parents' house. It was far from the center of Toronto and looked more like a ruin. The house looked just awful. Stripped wallpaper, dampness, marks on the mirrors and no cleaning. Dirt on the scraped parquet, some where the boards had already rotted. The kids were assigned a Merca-sized common room for household items. The children never accepted their new mother. On the whole, she turned out to be a worthless wife and mother. The children were mostly looked after by their grandparents, who were very stiff and ironic in the household. "You dropped a cookie. Now you're obligated to eat it, shake off the dust, and you don't get a new one. For another month you're cornered for every offense, and sometimes deprived of food." Another day Samantha's mom yelled at Michael, I pay so much money for you. How dare you study so disgustingly? You don't pay for me. Madam is providing for me. My father proudly replied the boy. Oh no, come here, trashy. Your father abandoned your own mother. Poor thing. Left alone. That thing named Victoria has totally spoiled you. I'm gonna drink the shit out of you. Continued to shout crazy grandmother, but already crying child. Alexander, seeing this scene, spoke to himself at the boy. How dare you yell at my son? Strictly asked the father. He is a careless, lazy, and arrogant boy, and Joseph is his exact copy. 8 years they've had it drummed into their heads. Now it's time to set them straight and make good Christians out of them. 2 lunatics. With those words, Alexander turned and took his son to his room on the 2nd floor. Did you see what your mother did too? Asked Samantha's spouse, who was sitting by the TV. As glued on the sofa, beer bottles and cookie crumbs were lying around. The woman didn't work anywhere or do anything around the house. Those kids are getting a little frustrated. Alex, they need to be raised properly, but not with violence. That's the best way to beat the crap out of them. The woman repeated her mother's words while drinking another bottle of beer. The man moved closer to the sofa. He was tormented. From the pungent odor of cheap alcohol and his wife's missing clothes. Are you drunk, Sam? I got a right to be. And you settle your kids down and go to work. The man shook his head in hopelessness. As they left the living room, which looked more like a brothel, her husband turned and said, You're not the Samantha I used to love. Your parents have changed you so much over the years. Samantha, you can't go on like this. However, when he saw that the woman wasn't even listening to him, he walked away and swore to himself that he would get out of this nightmare and get the children out of here. Alexander tried to spend as much time as possible with the children so that they would not be harassed by this sadist. However, while he was away on business, they were treated by his father-in-law and mother-in-law, and Samantha herself, who also often practiced this way of upbringing. The man could not fully protect his children from this family, and he could not take them away from this nightmarish house either. After all, by court order they had to raise them together. And the social workers were checking on that every 2 weeks, and Samantha herself was not at all eager to leave her parents. More and more he wondered how Victoria was feeling. How was she? Was she okay? How was she handling the situation? He was not even allowed to visit her, as he was forbidden to do so. Alexander was simply dying of despair. The man loved Victoria more than life. Yes, he used to be head over heels in love with Samantha, but she had changed. She was no longer the sweet and cheerful girl he had met at some party in Toronto years ago. Everything had changed since then, and life was divided into before and after, so he decided to take action. He found a good lawyer in town who could help him with the case, and even though he had to pay most of his personal injury settlement, it was worth it. The lawyer said there was a chance. I saved you. Without me, you. Without you, we would have lived just as happily, the man summarized, and left the bedroom, which reeked of dirty linen, alcohol, and cigarettes. It had been exactly 2 months since Alexander had last seen Victoria. He hoped to find her now in good health, cheerful and healthy. He dressed well and prepared himself for another hard day in his life. Samantha would be furious when she found out that Victoria's defense counsel was being sided with her husband, and he was ready for it, her judgmental eyes on him and weeping with anger. The eyes in the courtroom were full of people. Everyone was terribly interested. Where would this convoluted case end? There were 3 bangs of the gavel, and there was silence. Everyone in the courtroom, please be seated. Thank you. The judge scrutinized some documents on his desk, then looked around the room with a stern look. I asked the prosecution to come forward. A murmur went up. While in the center of the hall, certain people on the prosecution side came out. Along with the prosecutor, Samantha spoke. Standing up, she gave Alexander a caustic smirk. Suddenly, the courtroom doors fell away, and 3 officers walked inside, followed by a handcuffed woman. It was Victoria. Alexander's breath even caught. She looked exactly the same as she had when she'd been led away from here 2 months ago. Sure, she had lost a little weight and her hair was different, but her face was just as full of longing and hopelessness. She was led to a special place for the condemned, which was rewarded with 4 clear panes of glass. The defense side, please. The lawyer nodded to Alexander, and the latter went out following him. He did not look into the hall, because he already knew that there was a look of surprise on people's eyes, and Samantha was probably glaring at him. When he reached the podium, however, he still had to look up. And sure enough, the first thing he saw was the outraged face of Samantha, who clearly wanted to kill him right there. Unfortunately, he could not comfort his Victoria. After all, she was beyond his reach, but he was sure she was proud of him. That's exactly what Samantha Brown had reassured him. You are a victim in the abduction of your children. You claim they were stolen a month after they were born while you were in a coma. That is correct. Yes, Your Honor. The defense. What do you have to say to us? Alexander's attorney spoke first. Your Honor, it's simple enough. There was no abduction per se. The day Samantha gave birth to the twins, Victoria was her midwife. Before Mrs. Brown began to lose consciousness, she asked Mrs. Wilson for a favor. To quote from the witness, "Please take care of them. Don't give them to my parents." The judge didn't seem very convinced by these words. Can you offer any convincing evidence that that was the case? Yes, Your Honor. There are 3 people in this courtroom who were present that day at the clinic when Samantha Brown gave birth. They are our witnesses and can corroborate what I am saying. 3 people were called after that statement. All of them were women. Among them was Lily, who took over as chief medical obstetrician, and after Victoria's departure, Sarah, who had risen to the position of midwife, and another nurse. The judge interviewed each one, and they all testified the same thing. That's what happened. Samantha had indeed asked Victoria to take her children. Sam looked at Alexander with a judgmental look. At that moment, she realized that she was walking on thin ice because 3 witnesses was a serious line of defense. However, her attorney also had a strong argument that she hoped would outweigh the defense. Your Honor, Samantha's attorney took notice. Please take note of the fact that Samantha's physical condition did not allow her to make such serious decisions. As you know, after these words she went into a coma, which indicates that her mind was foggy. There was a commotion in the hall again. Everyone began to discuss the details of the story. Your Honor, Alexander began. The children grew up with Victoria as a single mother for 7 years. She was able to raise them into fine, well-mannered boys. They received a proper education, and they always had a favorable home environment, which is not the case with Samantha and her parents. The lawyer told his client to be clearer. I didn't want to use that as an argument. However, I'm going to have to. Samantha has suffered from alcohol addiction for a long time. I lived with the children at her parents' house with her for those 2 months, and that was long enough for me to realize that it was a completely inappropriate place for my children. An assistant came up to the judge and put some papers in front of him. You can see it from the photos I took personally, Alexander said. But that's not all. I have seen my children physically abused many times, their grandmother and grandfather. I had to protect them from physical abuse, and their birth mother, Samantha, is completely unable to raise them. I believe that children do not belong in such a family. Independent experts from the Juvenile Guardianship Commission were invited to the home, and they evaluated the situation and gave the report that is on your desk. Your Honor, counsel added. Samantha was quiet, groaning and swearing foully. She realized this was a complete failure. The court went into session, and until the verdict was reached, everyone in the room could rest for a while. Many people supported Alexander. Some came up and expressed their sympathy for him. Victoria smiled from behind the glass and thanked him with her eyes. He was proud of the work he had done. Finally, there was silence in the hall again. Silence. The judge came out. Everyone waited with trepidation for the decision of the peaceful gavel to strike again from the knocking 3 times. The court decided to recognize Michael and Joseph George, Antonio George, and Victoria George, with Victoria Georgia S. as the legal guardians of the minors. All charges previously filed are dismissed, the judge proclaimed, cutting through the noise in the room. He tapped the gavel again on Samantha Brown's biological mother. Permission to visit her children at a time to be determined separately after her treatment at the rehabilitation center. The trial is over. There will be no further appeal. The hall gave a standing ovation. Alexander had no idea how many people were supporting him. Victoria was uncuffed and released from the cage. She immediately ran up to her husband and smothered him in her arms. "I've missed you so much," Alex cried to the woman. "It's okay. We'll be fine now," he soothed his beloved. The taller children surrounded them. On her beloved mother, Victoria began to hug them, to kiss them. She hadn't seen her poor 2 months and didn't know if they would ever see her again. The woman did not let go of her children for a long time and led them by the hands all the way out of the courthouse. There they got into a cab and went to the hotel. The next day, the plane was already taking them away to their home of Istanbul, which had already become their home. It was there that Victoria's happy life began, where it would continue. Finally, the family was at peace again. Everything stabilized, and they all healed as before. After compulsory treatment, the court allowed herself to visit the children every month, any day by arrangement with their guardians. 2 months after she was discharged from the clinic, she wasn't seen at all. She seemed very angry about losing the case, but Victoria and Alexander did not want to see her, so they did not even try to call her. One beautiful summer day, however, a phone call came. Samantha said that she would come to the children in 2 days to spend time with them. She apologized for her behavior and assured that she holds no grudges. She just wanted to see the kids. Victoria, of course, was still hostile toward her former friend, but she had to put up with it. "Are you sure it's going to be all right?" Joseph asked at breakfast. "Of course, honey. We're doing this because you need to know your other mom. It wouldn't be fair if she couldn't communicate with you." That's how Vicky reassured the boy. "Yeah, I guess so. But she's bad and cruel." "No, she won't be mean to you. I'll be there for you all the time. Let's try to have a normal conversation with her for once." The doorbell rang. The boys were scared. Their father was at work, and it was he who represented in their eyes the greatest defense against this terrible woman. A voice came from the hallway. "The boys are in the living room." A woman with long white hair walked into the kitchen. It was Samantha. She didn't look the same when she was at her parents' house, no longer drunk and unkempt. Now she had smoothly combed hair, good makeup, and decent clothes. She looked pretty decent. That image inspired confidence, and "We're having breakfast here," Victoria explained, sitting down at the table and gesturing for Samantha to sit down as well. "Do you like pancakes?" "Of course. We used to have them a lot with you." When the woman in the class fell silent, she realized that she shouldn't have remembered those times when they were mysterious friends. "Yeah, I remember," broke Vicky's awkward silence, "which means you can eat a couple of them." "Because I've cooked too many." Samantha happily agreed. They had a strained discussion about the weather, the kids' favorite breakfasts, their progress in school. The conversations were decent enough, and Victoria was beginning to calm down. The idea of putting up with Samantha in her house once a month didn't seem like such a terrible phone call anymore. "I'm going to step away for a moment," Victoria muttered with a smile. The boys were a little concerned about their mother leaving, but Samantha kept them busy asking questions, so they were a little distracted. "I am called to work, so I will unfortunately leave you for today." Vike turned to the boys. "Samantha, can you keep an eye on them? Today they have a chance to play with them if you want. It's very bonding. And then tonight we'll watch a movie together. Just please not a scary movie. Otherwise they won't be able to sleep without a student for a week." "Mom." An embarrassed Michael shouted indignantly. "I'll shut up. You guys are the bravest. I love you. I'll be back tonight. Please don't do anything here without me. Daddy will be home early anyway." and Victoria left the house. "What should we call you, Auntie, or the other mom?" Joseph asked. Samantha was a little angry at such an inappropriate question, but did not show it. "I think it would be easier for everyone if you'll just call me Sam." The boys laughed with relief. "Good, Sam," Michael said, looking at his brother and his reaction. He grinned, too. "So, boys, I can see you're having fun already, but why don't we continue the fun and go to the amusement park?" "Who's in favor of amusement parks? Didn't Mom say to stay home?" Michael asked, surprised. "Your mom said I should just keep an eye on you. That doesn't mean we can't go have fun. So pack up, and we're leaving in half an hour." "Do you have a car?" "I thought you came by airplane." "Yes, my dear, but we can hire a car. So let's pack up and go on a real roller coaster." The children scurried merrily to their rooms to get ready for the park, while Samantha stayed in the kitchen drinking tea. Her plan had worked flawlessly so far, and she was pleased with her foresight and fortunate circumstances. "CCU. I made myself known at home." Mother, entering the apartment, it was surprisingly quiet and dark. Maybe the children had already gone to bed. It was already 11 o'clock in the evening, so Samantha had probably put them to bed. Vicky decided. Maybe their friendship wasn't completely lost yet, and they could at least partially regain their old and good relationship. She peeked into her bedroom. Alexander wasn't there yet, but he'd warned her that he might stay out late tonight, so Vicky wasn't particularly worried. Tony or Alex. Sometimes she was lost as to what to call him now. He was in charge of security at a nightclub and often came back late. She poured herself some tea with rose petals and sat down in the kitchen. Leafing through social media feeds, she thought it was strange that Samantha had left without waiting for her. Maybe she'd fallen asleep, putting one of the boys to bed. Victoria decided to check the room. What she saw, or rather didn't see, shocked her. The beds were empty, with abandoned things lying everywhere in disarray. She ran to Michael's room, where she saw the same picture. Vicky began to nervously call herself. The number was unavailable. She called again. This attempt ended with the same result. Then Victoria rushed to the bedroom at the speed of light. Her hunch was confirmed. Missing were all the children's papers, birth certificates, insurance, everything. The girl's hands began to tremble with shaking hands. She dialed her husband's number. He didn't answer either. What the hell was going on? Where did everyone disappear to? They decided to run away with the children together, left her alone. However, she found Alexander's passport. He wouldn't have left it behind if he wanted to run away. So he did stay at work. Maybe something happened. While she was gone, a burglar broke into their house, took them hostage. Victoria's mind was filled with all sorts of thoughts. In the back of her mind, however, she'd long since figured it out. This mysterious disappearance. Samantha had kidnapped her children. She tried once again to call Alexander, to no avail. There remained the only way out: the police. The girl dialed the number and waited for the operator to answer. She was told that the patrol would arrive in a few minutes. However, these minutes lasted like an eternity. Victoria pressed her fingernails into the pads of her fingers. She always did this when she was wildly stressed in some places. She even developed small scars. The doorbell rang. The woman opened it instantly and invited the police in. They were two officers of large build, which inspired confidence and was even reassuring in some way. So, ma'am, repeat again. What were the boys wearing? When did you leave for work? Asked the officer again. I told you they were in their pajamas, and when I went into their rooms, I saw clothes scattered all over the floor. They'd obviously changed clothes. Officer, hysterically declared the mother. The man offered the lady a seat and a drink of water, which she did. A little calmed down, she said to my scene, but then into the apartment came the very one who had just been talked about. Alexander looked at her with round, horrified eyes. He quickly discerned people in police uniforms searching around the apartment and taking pictures of everything. What's going on here again? Vic, shocked, asked the man. The dark-skinned man of full build who was holding a pen and a piece of paper looked at him. "Sir, come this way. We will quickly explain the situation to you. There is no time to waste in the precious time it will take to find your children, my children." "Victoria, where are Michael and Joseph?" Alexander was already shouting. Victoria couldn't take the pressure and burst into tears right in front of everyone. "Sir, you waste time yelling. You are worried about your wife and children." The man realized his mistake and approached the officer with the same terror in his eyes. "Your children stayed with their birth mother all day, and your spouse went to work entrusting her with the boys. I know that. She told me everything. She was urgently called to work." In a calmer tone, said Alexander, "We suspect Samantha Brown of kidnapping your children. Can you give us any information about her whereabouts? Maybe she called you." "No, I haven't received any calls. My phone died at work and I couldn't get through." Alexander walked over to his wife and sat down next to her. Now the officer was interviewing the two of them. "Do your children have any phones or means of communication?" Victoria wondered. Because of the stress, she did not immediately understand the policeman's question. And then it hit her. She even got excited. "Yes, they have cell phones. We bought them so they could call us from school in case of an emergency." Victoria immediately realized her mistake. Why didn't she think of that in the first place? Call Michael or Joseph. They would have answered for sure. They're smart boys. They'd think of something, wouldn't they? "Did you call them?" The officer asked in a stern tone. "No, I didn't." But the officer didn't let her finish. "Great, give me their numbers." The woman dictated her children's phone numbers. And then she stopped talking again. She looked at Alexander, trying to find support in his eyes. Her husband locked his arms around her shoulders, and they waited together. "What does the officer say?" "Boney," said the officer into the radio to the right of the number I just dropped you. "Get the location." The policeman took one look at you alarmed couple. "Don't worry, we'll find them. We've found people after they've been reported missing only days later. It's gonna be okay." His walkie-talkie forbidding voice spoke out. "I found them, but they're in completely different places. It's weird." The kids were together. When the couple heard this information, they panicked. Had Samantha killed them? But that couldn't have happened. She wouldn't kill her own children. The officer was also in a stupor, but into his walkie-talkie he ordered, "Send a car to each of these addresses. Have them clear every handful of land there." "Copy that." The voice on the phone went dead. "Do you have any idea where they might have gone?" "Toronto," Alexander said out of the blue. "Samantha flew to us from Toronto. She probably rented a car to drive there. They wouldn't let them out at the airport, but she'll be driving there. God knows how long." The officer objected. Samantha would hardly be intimidated by that. An hour later, they were on the highway. The detective stated that his men had found 2 cell phones, but they hadn't found anything else. Perhaps Samantha had done it to throw them off the trail. However, after a thorough investigation, they learned that there had been 2 carjackings in the area of the exit highway. Perhaps the woman was changing cars to get away from the pursuit. Alexander and Victoria were traveling in a car with police officers. They found one of the cars that had been abandoned in a field. It contained the children's belongings. Vicky found Michael's favorite sweater there. "Alex, we'll definitely find them," sobbed the girl, clutching in her hands the only native thing they found during the search. "Vicky, it's going to be okay. We'll catch up with them. We'll make it. The main thing is not to despair," replied her husband. Although he himself doubted the effectiveness of this chase, they drove to another scene of the accident. There they were met by a man who reported the theft of the car. "She cuts me off, pulls a gun on me, and throws me out of the car. I didn't even have time to object before I was on the street without my car and without my dog," the victim emotionally recounted. "You had a dog in your car?" The officer was surprised, writing down all the statements. "Yes, they stole my little girl." The victim gave them the license plate number of his car and also showed them the direction the crazy woman could have gone. "What did the kids look like?" Victoria braked the man. They were intact. They didn't have any bruises. No, startled by this reaction, the man replied. They looked tired. However, they didn't try to run anywhere or ask for help. Samantha seemed to be beckoning to their brains with her mind. She could spin any nonsense she wanted, such as that they were going to visit her, and there would be a mom waiting for them. Mom or just scared them a lot, and the kids would just obey her. She could lie about anything. The cunning of this woman was obvious. "I've got them," one of the uniformed guys told the officer. "They're taking the Atatürk highway. We can catch up with them." "Get in the car," ordered the officer to the tired couple. They were exceeding the already breakneck speed with every new second. And Victoria thought they would eventually crash. She and Alex were in the car along with 2 policemen. The first was driving. The second was negotiating on the radio. The other cars were traveling behind them. Suddenly, around the corner of the highway, they saw a car with the same license plate. It was them, Samantha and their kids. "I got them. We're in pursuit. You're spreading out on the highway, blocking traffic so she doesn't turn anywhere. Do it," shouted the officer to the officers on the radio. "We've almost caught up with them," the officer stated. To the trembling parents of Samantha Brown, "Stop the vehicle immediately," shouted he into a megaphone. "Are you breaking the law? I repeat, stop the vehicle or we will open fire." Samantha's response almost killed Victoria. Literally, a bullet flew over her shoulder. After recovering from the initial shock, she saw the wounded officer in front, who was sitting next to the driver. The bullet had scratched his arm. She really does have a real gun. Victoria became even more worried about the children. The car wiggled from side to side, trying to catch up with the perpetrator. And then something happened that Victoria didn't expect at all. A bullet slammed into the driver's arm, piercing the windshield. Failing to control himself, he crashed into a fence as if it took Victoria an eternity to hear the whistling and laughter in her ears. Opening her eyes, she saw blood. A lot of blood. The officer who had been sitting next to the driver had been thrown through the windshield straight to the ground. The driver himself was typing into the airbag and was unconscious. But when she saw Alexander, she felt nauseous and pained, but he was alive. She realized it by the movement of his chest, which rose and fell. He was simply unconscious. He probably had multiple fractures, though, because he took the hardest hit, realizing that there was no way she could help him on her own. The woman got out of the car. 2 SWAT cars and an ambulance were already approaching them. Victoria showed them where the people were and ran to the other car. They hadn't gotten far yet. "Give me the car. I'll catch up with them." She screamed hysterically. "You can't drive." "Calm down." Victoria came right up to the sergeant and grabbed him by the scruff of the neck. Her eyes glittered with anger. "My children are in mortal danger right now, and I don't care about your rules or laws. Give me your goddamn car, or I swear I'll force you into it and you'll drive me." "Okay," agreed the policeman, frightened by her energy. "I like your plan very much. Just calm down. Please, get in the car. I'll drive." Victoria fast got into the car. A moment later, a young sergeant got behind the wheel. It looked like he was just starting to work for the police, and maybe she would deprive the poor guy of his job and his life at the same time. But all she cared about now was her children and their well-being. "They're speeding up," the woman shouted. "I can't. We're gonna crash this whole thing into pure suicide. Take the wheel. We're going to switch places now," Victoria declared. "You're not entitled. I'm entitled to everything when it comes to my children. Either you switch places with me right now, or your family gets word that their kid died in a car accident." Of course, Victoria's lying. However, the boy seemed to be impressed by these threats. He held the steering wheel while Victoria shifted into the driver's seat. At one point, she sat on his lap. The guy grimaced in embarrassment because Victoria was wearing a short skirt. "Look at the road, not there," yelled the furious mother. Finally, when Victoria finally switched the kid and places, she pressed hard on the gas. There were only a few meters between them and the car they were chasing. Samantha tried to fire again, but it only slowed down the speed of the car Victoria was chasing and missed. Victoria was almost able to catch up with Samantha's car, and that's when the worst happened. As they hit the bridge at breakneck speed, did something happen inside Samantha's car, and the car slammed full speed into an iron pole, causing a fire? No. There was Victoria's heartbreaking scream. "Oh God, no!" Pulling up to a safe distance so that the imminent explosion wouldn't spread to their car, Victoria jumped out and ran to the burning car. With difficulty, she opened the back door of the car. She felt a wild pain as she opened the door, which was just as red-hot as lava. Vicky cried out in pain, yet still crawled into this burning hell. She prayed to God that her children would survive and her prayers would be answered. She pulled first Michael and then Joseph out of the car. Both were unconscious, but alive. And that was the most important thing. Get them to emergency services and get them the help they needed. Ordered that an ambulance be called here as well. Ordered Vicky to run up to the boys. The man nodded, grabbed the children in his arms, and put them in his car. Already in a moment, the car was rushing down the highway in the opposite direction. Now it was up to Victoria to find out what had happened to Samantha. She ran to the front driver's door and, remembering a past mistake, wrapped her hand in her shirt. Only then did she pull the door open. What she saw horrified her more than anything else she'd seen that day. Half of her face was churned into her chest, with the debris of something iron jabbed into it and pierced through her. But the worst part was that she was still conscious. Samantha barely turned her head. All that could be heard was a faint wheeze singing from her shattered lips. "Blood. Shut up. Help is coming. Just be patient a little longer," Victoria shouted, as angry as she was at the kidnappers. This was her friend, though they had betrayed her, yet a friend. And Vicky couldn't just stand by and watch Samantha die. "I'm sorry, Vicky. I'm sorry," sang Sam out of her last strength. Victoria squatted down and put a hand on her shoulder, as if to support Samantha. "My sweet Samantha, why did you and I have to make such a mess?" Vicky's tear rolled down her cheek. "I can't survive," mumbled Samantha in their arch into the blood. "Vicky's God. He will take me to heaven. But I want you to know, I never wished you harm. I want you to forgive me." The woman began to choke, blood gushing from her mouth. Victoria whispered, "I forgive you. Sam, of course I forgive you, and I still love you. Go in peace, my darling. Our children." Vicky didn't get a chance to finish. Her friend passed away in front of her. Victoria cried out in unbearable heartache. She had lost someone close to her who had given her true happiness. Be that as it may, it was thanks to Samantha that Victoria found a husband and children, found a real family. Happiness is nothing but close people who stay with you, no matter what you do. And Victoria was insanely grateful to the team that life had brought her to. She spent the rest of her life restoring Samantha's good name in the eyes of her children and their mutual children. She seemed to have succeeded. Her husband was devoted to her until his death. They lived a long and happy life and gave the world another living being, another child, a girl, their not-so-good little Sammy, who was named after the unfortunate mothers of their eldest sons who had died tragically. Subscribe and click the bell.
Evelyn was furious. She wanted to tear, throw, and smash the dishes, especially the one his parents had given her and John for their wedding. The exquisite set produced by the famous porcelain factory was not a pity, and it is desirable to break saucers and cups with recognizable cobalt mesh and heads, unfaithful quite the opposite, the husband and his mistress. Well, and let the beautiful porcelain perish, let the cheaters and vile duplicitous person suffer. That's what they should do. Let even I and Evelyn have to answer for this deed, even towards myself, betrayed by the man I loved. There was no pity. The soul was filled with resentment, anger, and a desire to get even with John, who, as it turned out, had not only cheated her, but also wanted to eliminate her. For him, his loving wife was just an unfortunate obstacle on the way to wealth. This Miranda is good too. Ready to be an accomplice to crime to help her lover achieve a dishonest goal. A burning mixture of emotions was pushing Evelyn to reckless action, but the woman with the remnants of prudence realized she couldn't afford to give in to her emotions. Her tantrum would mean victory for that nasty traitor John and his filthy bedfellow Miranda. To allow her own defeat, Evelyn could not allow herself to be defeated. Wow, just 15 minutes ago I was perfectly happy, and now everything in my life has changed so drastically that I'm dizzy. My husband has a mistress, and this is his Miranda, she personally hired, was always satisfied with the employee, and even provided her career growth. When Miranda complained about the deterioration of her health due to work in the kitchen, and said that she would look for a job in the office, she offered her a place as an accountant. Yes, Evelyn, you're a terrible judge of character. The woman scolded herself mentally. Out of all the options, she chose John, the one who had recently heard with his own ears, so cunningly and cold-bloodedly discussing with his mistress a plan to eliminate his wife. I want him to be so cunning and judicious that the law enforcement agencies have no questions for him because of his wife's premature death. Miranda, yuck, she's giving advice too. Interested in ridding her lover of his legitimate wife? Well, he's good. He wants to arrange the case in such a way as to stay in the maximum benefit. Almost no effort. That's where his law degree comes in handy. Although, as far as I know, John wasn't involved in criminal cases. But I can't say that I know him at all. How could I have ever imagined that in the company of his mistress, my husband would dare to eliminate me? Besides, who knows what kind of connections he has? It's quite possible that this nasty couple will manage to arrange the whole thing so that she, Evelyn, will go to the grave, and they will live happily ever after. Yeah, they're dangerous enemies. That's why we can't let these vile creatures know what they're up to. Otherwise, they will act even more secretly or accelerate the realization of a despicable plan in life. It is necessary to keep a cool head in order to expose the traitors without the possibility of getting away with it. Both John and Miranda must suffer the punishment they deserve for the dastardly deed they have so carefully planned, especially since the price of their success will be her life. An apartment and a little but still already profitable business. And after all, how wonderful and romantic everything began. The upset woman felt that tears were about to flow from her eyes and hastily parked the car in the parking lot in front of the nearest grocery store. Leaning back in her seat, Evelyn sank into her memories. During the period when she had met John, Evelyn's mood had been far from romantic. She was surrounded by the whirlwind of business associated with opening her own cooking shop, which planned to prepare baked goods from homemade recipes. Of course, it was much more complicated than using some already promoted franchise, but it was just such an original bakery. She planned to organize together with her childhood friend Molly. Their kind and trusting relationship had developed in high school, and then, although they had scattered to different colleges, they had kept their friendship almost unchanged. It was surprising, but romantic. And often flying in the clouds, Evelyn did not irritate straightforward and pragmatic Molly, and her serious advice often helped to avoid trouble. The tandem of such dissimilar girls was perfect, and in the cafe their roles were distributed long before the opening. Molly, who had a profession of accountant, was ready to take on all money matters because she knew them and even, surprising her friend, with love and attention, shared the delight of a successful debit and credit. Evelyn, who had been trained as a pastry chef just on the profile of the conceived enterprise, by that time had already worked for several years in a quite decent institution and learned many valuable nuances, about which nothing said teachers in college. With the registration of the company and the initial capital, the girls were greatly helped by their parents. But both Evelyn and Molly put out to the maximum, but it was still difficult. Far not stupid Evelyn very quickly realized that the experience was clearly not enough. Being an employee is much easier than managing everything yourself, but there was nowhere to retreat to, and the girls strived for their goal. On that momentous day, which turned absolutely everything upside down, Molly got sick, and Evelyn had to do the most unproductive thing in the world alone. Waiting, of course, the two of them would have been much more fun, but as it was solo, she tried to fill the time with something useful, cleaning, thinking about the menu again, as if she hadn't devoted nearly a few years to it. However, excitement kept her from concentrating, and the variety of sites on the World Wide Web helped not to agonize over the wait at all. The supplier promised to deliver the ordered furniture in the morning, literally from the moment she got up, but it turned out to be empty words. Evelyn during the day several times called, asked to wait for the car just a little bit. So Evelyn did not go far from the future establishment. She believed that in 15 minutes and then in half an hour, the furniture should finally be brought, but after another reminder, she was informed about the suddenly appeared problem. And as a result, even by lunchtime, nothing had been delivered yet. We managed to wait for the furniture only closer to the evening. The assemblers, however, were clearly skillful and soon departed, leaving behind a nice-looking version of the room. Evelyn was incredibly happy that her long-held idea was about to become a reality. But as soon as she closed the door behind the assemblers, she realized how tired she was. She knew from experience that there were two very opposite ways to regain strength. The easiest, of course, was to eat sweets. However, this option threatened her already not ideal figure, constantly fighting with the extra pounds on her body. Evelyn tried as little as possible to give in to the desire to eat, too disposed to fullness and favorite profession and heredity. So the girl chose an alternative and even healthy way, a walk in the city park, which from time immemorial was called the country park. Although in modern historical reality, it was practically in the center of the regional capital. It was quite close to it from the future cafe. Accordingly, Evelyn, on the advice of her parents, chose this place. The location is good, and the park reminds of carefree childhood, in which visiting the park was a real holiday, even if you went there almost every week during the summer season. Evelyn always looked forward to it with joyful anticipation. On the evening of meeting John, however, the walk seemed to come with a catch. Evelyn had too lightly ignored the clouds in the sky, hoping to complete her promenade before the rain began to fall. The downpour came suddenly, and the trusty umbrella let down, took and broke, refusing to manage its life-saving dome. Evelyn tried to hide under a tree, stretching its crown over the paved path to call a cab, and almost howled in frustration. While the furniture was being assembled, the girl was so worried about the process that she forgot to put her smartphone on the charger. And here is the sad result. Such a necessary gadget now nasty beeped and turned off, discharged to zero. Of course, exactly by the law of meanness, at the most inopportune moment, Evelyn had to hurry to the stop, feeling how not at all in spring cold threads of rain, causing shivering. And then the water stopped raining down on her from above. It turned out that some stranger had sheltered her under his umbrella, nestled next to her, and pacing to the girl's rhythm, the man offered, "Girl, you're probably already soaked, of course, but let me protect you nonetheless." Evelyn was a little confused, but did not reject the help. After all, there were other hurrying park visitors around, and it was not scary at all. Besides, the stranger behaved quite adequately and did not offer anything reprehensible or indecent. Together they reached the public transportation stop. A lot of potential competitors crowded under the awning. Shuttles were passing by, and the streetcar that came by was so packed with passengers that only a few of the most active lucky ones managed to squeeze into the carriages. The stranger introduced himself and explained, "My name is John. You know, I was taught that once you help, you should never give up." Evelyn didn't want to go to her parents' house for the night, so they gave her daughter a ride to the driveway. There, to the girl's surprise, John was waiting for her. He had flowers in his hands, and it so happened that he as if immediately met potential relatives. The man held himself without embarrassment, but apologized to Evelyn's mom and dad. "Jen and James, I apologize. I didn't think that today I was going to meet you, and I didn't prepare you and your husband appropriate presents. I promise to correct the mistake at our next meetings." Her parents were rather wary of the active, though very courteous John, but they could not influence Evelyn. She was completely enchanted by the man. He quickly became the most necessary person to her. The girl was a little disturbed that the relationship between her lover and Molly was turning out abominably. The girlfriend contemptuously wrinkled her nose when John gave her some compliments and did not hesitate to snap if he dared to make critical remarks. "Look, Evelyn, I understand the lovey-dovey, head-over-heels thing, but don't you notice how strange John's eyes are? It's like he's scanning the person he's talking to for easy and vulnerable weaknesses so that he can strike a devastating blow if he has to. His pupils dilate and constrict to the size of pinheads. Look, I wish you'd be more careful with him. Don't be in such a hurry to let him into your life." Evelyn tried her best to protect her lover. "Molly, you're not quite right. I mean, John does have a special, scrutinizing look, but that's just the cost of his former profession. He used to be a police officer, and then he decided to become a lawyer. Don't take offense that he criticizes you. He's just used to telling the truth. That red polka dot dress really turns you into some kind of villager. Remember what we used to say when we were kids? You look like an auntie mother in that dress." Evelyn did not even notice that John really often hurts and pokes, mocks her friend without any good reason. The walks together had stopped almost immediately. The man seemed to be polite, but managed to irritate Evelyn, causing an unpleasant feeling of jealousy because of the numerous and intrusive questions he asked her friend. He was interested in absolutely everything: where she studied, where and with whom she lives, what kind of accounting experience she has, and even in what store she prefers to buy clothes. In the end, he was tired of answering. Molly, who was not known for her humility and patience, burst out, "John, why on earth would you think I'm in your office being interrogated? Look around. We're in the lobby of a movie theater with Evelyn. You give her your attention and leave me alone. I'm sick and tired of your questions. I'm tired of making excuses for something I didn't do." After that, the girl hastily said goodbye to her friend and went home, not listening to the entreaties to stay. Since then, Molly generally tried to avoid communicating with her unpleasant person. Of course, it was impossible to completely exclude meetings, but she tried not to talk to John and even sometimes frankly ignored the questions he asked her. By the fall, the cafe had become a success. There were regular customers, including not too wealthy, but many students from the nearby university. Evelyn was overjoyed. Judging by the figures Molly had shown her, there was already a net profit. It wasn't much, but it was good. "We haven't recouped our investment yet," the accountant reported. "But if things continue at the same pace, then, according to my forecasts, by the beginning of February, we'll recoup everything and work in the plus. I'll have to think about it. Maybe we could do something special for Christmas." Evelyn understood that she had to work even harder so that the stable high income would allow her small team to be proudly recognized as a winner. Therefore, the quality must not be reduced and the assortment must be renewed. Her friend's idea turned out to be successful, and soon technological maps for painted holiday gingerbread were already being developed. Simultaneously with the growth of profits, another joyful event took place. John made Evelyn a proposal to marry him, and she, without playing the popular girlish coquetry, "Olga, I need to think," immediately responded with consent. Molly, on hearing the news, wrinkled her pretty face and gave her friend a shocked expression of her feelings on the subject. "I feel for you, Evelyn. That slippery John is clearly not out of love for you, insisting on getting married." Evelyn was incredibly offended at the time. "So you think I'm impossible to love? Is it because I'm fat? Well, you should know that John is perfectly happy with my figure." Molly tried to justify herself. "I'm not talking about your looks. You're fine with them. Although I noticed that in the morning, instead of a croissant, you chew oatmeal cookies with coffee without adding sugar and cream. I just suggest you take a closer look at how John behaves when he thinks no one can see him. It's like he's doing calculations in his head all the time." Evelyn got defensive about her lover, and finally that conversation ended in an ugly spat between the friends. They almost stopped communicating, except for work matters. However, neither the quarrels with her best friend nor her mother's requests to take a break and think did not affect Evelyn's decision. She perceived doubts in the groom as an insult to her personally. The girl was infatuated with John and married him. The only thing she went against her fiancé in was his desire for a prenuptial agreement. Wide a romantic Evelyn seemed that it lowers the bright feeling of love to a pragmatic deal. John did not insist, but at his gentle request, the gift money was used to buy the family car. Evelyn was not at all embarrassed by the fact that she did not have a driver's license at that time, and in fact, the car became the sole property of her husband. He sometimes drove her to work, but often their schedules didn't coincide. To get to work and back to her apartment, where she now lived with John, she had long been accustomed to public transportation, and her driving school tuition was constantly postponed because she was so busy. Business required constant attention. Competitors were not slumbering, opening nearby establishments of similar orientation. Had to constantly go half a step ahead, not only responding to demand. Gradually, after careful thought and calculation, we came up with new products. Some ideas turned out to be unsuccessful, but in general, the development of the business pleased both the owners and those who received jobs and decent wages. In the process, there were several not too pleasant cases when visitors tried to seek compensation for allegedly substandard products. But John intervened in the proceedings, and everything was settled in a pre-trial manner. For this intercession, Evelyn fell even more in love with the man. He seemed to her a real ideal. However, dissatisfied customers were the exception. Mostly visitors liked the institution, but business partners not satisfied with the results achieved. In the assortment appeared sweets, made for people who adhere to good nutrition. Evelyn, though she was not immediately aware of it, was embarrassed by her sweet, vanilla raisin bun-like figure. She was annoyed by her own rounded knees, her chubby arms, the fat accumulations hiding her waist. Disregarding the advice of her mother, the young woman began to adhere to a strict diet. The regime of calorie deficit not immediately, but still went in favor of the figure, but from the former cheerful character is almost nothing left. Only trust in her husband was unchanged. Over time, Evelyn and Molly decided to expand their own network and open another cafe. Let it again lead to anxiety and turmoil, but there should be development. That's what the friends thought. Of course, Evelyn informed John about the idea, with whom she always shared all the news. "Honey, we have the money to invest in the expansion, although we will probably have to take out a loan to speed up the process." But Molly is optimistic. John, in response, has given his wife the benefit of the doubt. "You know, it seems to me that the cafe should have shown much better results. I don't want to upset you, but if you want my opinion, I'll give it to you." "Of course, John, I'm listening attentively." Evelyn encouraged her lover and heard something she didn't expect. In general, to be honest, without any offense, it is necessary to double-check how it is your kind. Molly keeps accounting. "I think she's taking some of the money out from under your nose, taking advantage of your boundless trust. Opening a new outlet, that's a lot of money to sneak around. She'll collude with the decorating crew. She'll make even more money off your naivete." Evelyn was outraged. "Oh, come on, John. Molly's like a sister to me. We've been friends since high school, and I have confidence in her." The man continued to insist. "I'm telling you, she's stealing profits, happy that you're naive and gullible. She's jealous of you, that's why she's doing it. And I'm afraid that's just the flowers, and she's saving the berries. Well, if Molly decides to punish you financially for your happiness. She once tried to charm me despite you. I regret that I didn't immediately turn on my tape recorder and record her calling you fat and suggesting that I start an affair with her." Evelyn didn't immediately believe her husband. After all, it's not easy to undo a friendship that has lasted more than 17 years. However, John, with the persistence of a man absolutely sure of his own rightness, continued to convince his wife that in the form of Molly, she had a snake in her heart. The second cafe was open, but the renovation of the premises was completely under John's control. Molly often complained to Evelyn that the estimate seemed excessive, but her friend reassured her. "John knows what he's doing." Stubborn Molly pointed both her friend and her husband to the lines in the printed table, openly said that some positions are not very real at all, but earned only a contemptuous statement. "John, well, of course, you only see the numbers. You probably compared the cost of services of some gastarbeiters and the prices of goods taken from old ads. You think you are someone else. What an expert in heels." Molly wanted to get into a verbal fight with her friend's husband, but Evelyn, trying to smooth the conflict, got into the argument. "You know, remember Pushkin's fairy tale. You can't just chase after cheapness. You yourself realize how important for the perfect result are quality materials and a reliable team. These figures also include the conviction that everything will be done quickly, professionally, without unnecessary nervousness for us." John and Molly exchanged hateful glances. The girl called Evelyn her husband a night cuckoo, but did not stop criticizing his actions, causing her friend's displeasure. The man also did not lag behind and regularly told his wife that she trusted her smarmy accountant in vain. Everything was complicated by the fact that Evelyn, although she admitted it to herself, hardly envied the slender and incredibly graceful, which without consequences for the figure, dainty buns, and in general had a very attractive appearance. The boat of friendship, rocking more and more strongly, which quite predictably led to disaster. About a year ago, a terribly unpleasant conversation had taken place between the friends. They then sat up in a closed cafe, from which Eve left, who had already done her job cleaning lady, and discussed the details of opening a new, already the third branch. John found a place for the establishment and even made a deposit from the family stash. After Molly said that the man offered a knowingly failed option, located in an unsuccessful neighborhood and obviously not for the simplicity of heart, overpaid. Evelyn took offense for her beloved and told her friend everything that accumulated on her soul. She even mentioned Molly's signs of attention to her husband. For a few seconds after the verbal outpourings of her friend, Molly was silent and then grinned. "Evelyn, I'm sorry, but everything you just said is complete nonsense. I swear I have no interest whatsoever in your precious John. More to the point, I despise him, and even kind of hate him for the way he's managed to shake our friendship to the state it's in now. Your John, pardon my bluntness, he's an opportunist as cunning and thoughtful as a nesting cuckoo. He systematically destroys all competitors for resources, remaining the only and favorite. You yourself think with your head. He lives on your territory, drives a car which is registered to him, but bought with your money. You almost completely updated his closet. Remember at your leisure and count how much he contributes to the budget of your family. In fact, it's time you opened your eyes. Can't you see that this John of yours is just pitting us against each other? How can you be so naive? If we're having this conversation, John was trying to flirt with me, not me with him. But it didn't work out, so I told him to fuck off. When that stunt didn't work, he decided to eliminate me from the people you trust. Well, I'll tell you what. I vouch for my work. Everything in our business is good with accounting. Even an additional independent audit you can order. But I'm warning you, it's a waste of money. If all you care about is John's peace of mind, then we're not going anywhere. I'm sick and tired of him meddling in everything, even in matters he has no idea about and turning you against me. So along with the accounting firm, get an accountant. After this total distrust, it's unlikely we'll be able to continue working as before. How then Evelyn was angry, indignant, and a little frightened. After all, John had warned her that this was exactly how Molly would respond. So her husband was right about everything else. The audit was conducted. No irregularities were found. And no matter how hard Evelyn tried to talk her friend out of quitting, Molly was adamant. The question of her share in the business was also solved when Evelyn, with the help of John of course, stammered that she was ready to pay a certain amount. In addition to the share of authorized capital, the girl agreed, although in her eyes was clearly visible contempt. "I hope you realize what you're doing." Coldly, Molly said, "I refuse my participation in the business and leave the founders only because I do not want to have anything to do with the family, which is ruled by a despicable man. I just want to give you one last warning. Don't dissolve into him. He's not the kind of man you can trust unconditionally." As it seemed so convenient at the time, Miranda, the pastry chef, told the owner of the cafe that her health was making it difficult for her to work in the kitchen. She took Molly's place. And Evelyn simple-mindedly all this year did not even think about the fact that everything was somehow successful and well put together. She just had no time to think again, and she couldn't suspect her husband. She still loved him blindly. John had become everything she could be, lover, friend. There was no one in the spacious hall, and the woman was ready to shout a greeting, but suddenly she heard her husband's voice in the hall, potentially suitable for the kitchen. Not understanding what had come over her, Evelyn tiptoed closer and realized that John was speaking not to the builders, but to his mistress, and it seemed to be her, his lawful wife. Most of all now I regret that in due time I did not persuade this cow in love to sign the contract. I would have laid it out so well that it would have been hard for her to figure it out, and after the divorce, she would have been left with nothing. Then you and I would be on fire, but for now, it's just the way it is. The familiar female voice, which Evelyn easily recognized as her accountant Miranda's, rebuked her crankily. "Let's at least go out tonight. Go for a walk or rent an apartment, shall we?" "It's a bit extreme." John sighed expressively. "Oh, Miranda, I'd invite you over. But my wife's mother might show up at the apartment at the worst possible moment. Her lovely daughter will be here tomorrow, and she'll think of all sorts of fatty goodies. She herself is fat, and she has raised her daughter the same way." Miranda's voice spoke again. "Well, John, you're not quite fair. Yours has lost a lot of weight lately." Unaware that Evelyn was standing a few meters away from him, John laughed. "Well, scrawny cow, not yet a quivering doe. Sagging skin, though she's trying to do some exercises, but she's got a nasty temper. That's like you, not a woman, but a feast of the soul. And body," Miranda said flirtatiously. "Yes, Miranda and body. I myself would like to enjoy your company in a comfortable environment, but for now I have to hide. But that's okay, we'll bury this fatty and take every penny." Evelyn held on only on moral willpower. There was a great desire to appear in front of her lovers and express their indignation, not shy in expressions. However, the next phrase Miranda literally made stick to the floor. "No, John, it is desirable to cremate Evelyn. Then we can live without fear. After all, in that case, no one will be able to find out the real reason for your widowhood." There was both admiration and something like fear in John's voice as he answered his mistress. "You're a dangerous little thing, Miranda. Do you watch too many detectives? You're right. Cremation is the perfect way to hide the ends, but not in water, but in fire. I'll probably have to talk to her parents about burial arrangements, but I think I can convince them that the option I'm proposing makes sense. It is unpleasant that they too will be heirs of the first turn, but it is also solvable. Again, from the loss of my beloved only daughter, there's not much that can happen. I believe you will think of everything in the best way." Miranda squealed enthusiastically. There was the sound of kissing, and instinctively recoiling from the revulsion that seized her, Evelyn caught a water bottle lying on the floor, which must have been left by the builders. "Oh, John," Miranda exclaimed, "I think I heard some noise in the next room." "Oh, come on, it's nothing. The builders are long gone. Maybe a mouse from the slackness of unscrupulous exterminators survived." John began to calm his mistress. "I think you just imagined it, but don't be nervous and don't get distracted. We'd have more pleasant things to do than chase mice, my kitty." Evelyn even covered her mouth with her hand to keep from screaming with resentment and disgust at the luscious tone of John's voice. Miranda continued to insist. "John, please go and see what's out there. I can't relax thinking that someone is around or even peeking at us." Not waiting for Miranda to persuade John to check the room, Evelyn hurried away quietly so as not to let on that she was here and had overheard such an unpleasant conversation. Wiping away her tears, Evelyn picked up her phone and looked online to verify her husband's words. It was just as he had said. Since they hadn't decided to have a child yet, if something happened, her parents and the cunning, sneaky John would be the first-line heirs. The woman was horrified. So her mom and dad are also at risk. There was no doubt left. One must strike a preemptive strike against the traitors. Can't risk her parents, can't worry them either. Going home and pretending to John that she missed him, that she was happy to see him, and that everything between them was still the same, Evelyn was in no condition. Ironically, the only person to whom the woman treacherously betrayed by her supposedly loving husband and seemingly reliable employee could turn for help was Molly. Except, as a once resentful friend, would treat the request to at least listen and offer sound advice. Almost without breathing, Evelyn listened to the long beeps, and then finally, a vigorous greeting came from the speakers. "Hello, Molly. Please forgive me for everything. You were completely right. I'm in such a situation that I'm scared, terribly scared. Please meet me." I can't tell you everything over the phone. Molly had forgiven her friend, or she was gloating. Evelyn didn't care. What mattered was that she heard the words that were so important to her. All right, come on over. You probably haven't forgotten the address. My parents are on vacation, by the way, or they probably wouldn't let you in. Unlike her friend, Molly did not want to live separately from her mom and dad. She thought with her rational mind that there was no point in getting involved in mortgage bondage, and it is better to save the necessary amount, little by little, so as not to overpay. Soon Evelyn was already sitting in the cozy kitchen and under the ticking of the antique clock, which since the childhood of her girlfriends were already in this very place, and having told about her problem, summed up. That's the story. You can rightfully say that you warned me about not trusting John completely. I was wrong, and now I'm surprised I didn't notice what kind of person he really is. I guess the whole staff knows about his affair with Miranda, except for me. Molly shook her head as she listened to her friend without interrupting. Even I didn't expect this from your husband, even though I've seen that he's a real scoundrel without principles or morals. I didn't think he'd be willing to do such a thing for profit. But I can't imagine how you're going to do it. Most likely the time is very little, because they have already decided everything, judging by what you say. I'm sorry, I'm not gonna say the nicest things. But since they're agreeing on cremation, it's likely that poisoning will be the method of your elimination. Probably the best solution would be to move out of your own apartment for a while and strictly forbid any food or drink from John and Miranda's hands. But there's a catch. Your enemies may not slip the poison directly, but simply place it within reach. Going to the police is probably useless and maybe even more dangerous than dealing with John on your own. I understand you didn't make a tape of the conversation between your husband and his mistress. And on top of all that, he may still have friends among the police. It's your word against his word, so it's a pretty good bet. John is a lawyer, and things may not work out in your favor. I'm also concerned that your parents are at risk. Even if you leave, as if on a long business trip or on vacation, they can override their plan and take care of Jenna's uncle and aunt, who, if it happened to you, would be heirs of the first turn. Feel sorry for them, and frankly for you too. You got yourself into this John of yours. Now you're gonna have to work hard to get out of it without getting hurt. So you can't run away, and it's dangerous to make a scandal right now. I don't know how the sweet couple of lovers will act then. We will have to win by cunning, but we must think it over very well. The friends began to think over the options, but the conversation was interrupted by Evelyn's call. It was John. Answer it, but don't talk to him for long, or he'll be able to sense something wrong from your voice. Tell him you're tired and you're going to bed. Molly whispered her advice for some reason. John spoke to Evelyn sweetly and sympathetically. She almost began to doubt that she had recently heard with her own ears how her husband dreamed of the happy life of a rich widower, just as her friend had advised. The woman was more silent than speaking, and seeing the eloquent glance to wrap up, quickly ended the conversation by imitating a yawn. John, I am terribly tired today. See you tomorrow. Making sure the call ended, Evelyn put the smartphone down on the table and grimaced, trying to hold back the tears that were bursting out. How could anyone lie so perfectly? If I didn't know he was dreaming of getting rid of me, I'd actually believe what he said about the separation being unbearable for him. Lies, so cynical, deceives, so unprincipled, speaks tender words, even with the slightest intonation, without revealing his true feelings and desire to destroy me. What kind of man is he? Molly consoled a friend who had almost become an ex for good. Unfortunately, it was obvious to everyone but you that your chosen one was a fruit. You didn't listen to anyone's advice, But there's no time to regret the past. You have to do something in the present, so as not to get into an even more difficult situation. Evelyn was horrified at how Molly was calmly studying the situation and only managed to ask something. "What am I supposed to do?" Molly continued to reason, saying everything with a stride so as not to unnerve her friend. "First of all, you should not panic. It won't help and may even harm you. I'm afraid that with the active assistance of Miranda, John has insured himself and withdrawn to secret accounts, probably opened on someone else's data, an impressive amount of money. Of course, if they expect to eliminate you completely, maybe they didn't make unnecessary movements. What's the use of making a fuss, and in case of unfavorable circumstances, risk being caught? If after a short wait, you can get a much bigger payoff. Anyway, the first point of our plan is to find out the details of their conspiracy. We need information like air, but only time, as I understand it, is short, catastrophic. I cannot even think of the right thing to do. Probably, it will be better to be reinsured, and your parents should be sent somewhere on vacation until everything is resolved. It will be necessary to lie low, to catch all the oddities, to reliably denounce the traitors. It would be nice to be able to listen in on John's conversations. But unfortunately, I don't know anyone who can get such equipment quickly. Do you?" Evelyn shook her head. "Neither do I. Besides, to be honest, I'm not at all sure I can play the part of a loving wife knowing John's meanness. I'm both scared and disgusted at the same time." Molly questioned the reliability of the strategy she had devised. "Yeah, I didn't realize that. You have everything on your face as well as on the screen, so we have to go to the bank. And the key to this scenario is surprise and a support group. Ideally, tomorrow morning, when John comes out of your apartment. By the way, the locksmith called by you urgently changes the locks. It is unlikely that your husband has had time. Poison added to your favorite coffee or other foods that only you consume. But categorically, I would not exclude such a possibility. So Evelyn better update your grocery stockpile for good measure. Next, to catch Miranda by surprise, you need to somehow lure her out of her workplace so that she, unsuspecting, has no time to clean up unwanted data or even delete it altogether. Well, next you file for divorce and the procedure of property division begins. Perhaps it will be problematic, but it will be a battle, as they say, with an open mind. On accounting, if you still trust me, I can check everything or independent auditor's order. I think the chances of success are quite real. You could file a police report just in case John makes an attempt on your life, but he'll probably be afraid to act directly," Evelyn confessed. "Molly, I prefer the second option. I can't play that kind of game." Molly shrugged. "Well, that's fine. You're a straightforward and honest person, though you're easily influenced. So now let's go to bed, and tomorrow we'll do great things. Let's make a prior arrangement with the locksmith to have a locksmith on standby." Evelyn didn't know how to thank her friend, who had managed to forget the bitter insult she had suffered. All words seemed pathetic and empty. She was stunned by the breadth of Molly's soul and apologized again for having jeopardized a long-standing friendship because of a man who turned out to be a scoundrel. In the morning, Molly warned the head of the firm where she worked that she would appear at lunchtime, and together with Evelyn went to her apartment. John was already gone, and while the locksmith arrived to change the lock of the friend, they sorted out the products that could potentially be dangerous. They put jars and boxes into bags, and then got busy dumping John's belongings into suitcases. By the time the hired man handed the landlady a set of keys, everything was packed. After locking up the apartment, the girls drove to their first cafe, which had once been their joint project. On the way, Evelyn sent a text message to her accountant asking her to drive up to the building where the renovations were taking place. After making sure Miranda had left, the girlfriends entered the premises. Molly immediately began to study the information on the computer, since her successor had not even bothered to change the password. Evelyn, meanwhile, dialed the number of her mother, whom she didn't dare to upset last night, briefly explained the situation to her, and asked her not to answer John and his parents' calls if possible, and to leave town for a while or at least take care of the security measures. Evelyn, don't worry about us. We've been through worse than this. If anything, be sure to call us, we'll help you. Give my love and thanks to Molly. Your father and I will be there tonight, and even sooner if necessary. Evelyn thanked her mom and promised to keep her in the loop. She ended the conversation. Molly had by now found the documents necessary to expose the dishonest accountant and change the password on the computer so that Miranda, when she came to her senses, would not be able to fix anything. The bustling life of the cafe went on as usual, and the staff had no idea that a real coup was underway. Jean was very surprised when he heard from Evelyn, who called him that she was filing for divorce. That's a very funny joke, my love, but today I dare remind you it's not April 1. Well, I've got a lot to do, so you can explain at home tonight what went through your charming head. All right? Kisses, my puffy. Evelyn looked at her friend in bewilderment. He didn't think I was serious about the divorce. Molly grinned not too kindly. He's sure you're still madly in love with him. But as far as I can tell, he's probably on the phone with his mistress at this very moment to see what's going on. The nasty couple will be here soon. Most likely they will come one at a time. Molly wasn't wrong. The friends had barely had time to sip a cup of coffee with the novelty of the menu when John appeared in the office. The man's handsome face, for a split second, contorted with a grimace when he saw his wife in Molly's company. However, he instantly took control of his emotions and said hello to his wife and then to her friend. Evelyn, I insist that you explain to me what happened on the business trip. Except this conversation is clearly not for anyone's ears. Molly, do you have the decency to leave me alone with my wife? She and I have a lot to discuss. Evelyn asked. John, we can't talk alone. If you want, let's discuss what you wanted to discuss. I'm listening to you carefully. The man was puzzled, but decided to ignore the woman who always put him off balance and raised his hands in the air, as if in a sign of joking capitulation, clarified. What's this unfortunate divorce joke? Evelyn spoke calmly, although it was necessary to clench her fists to the point of whitening her knuckles. No, John, I'm not kidding at all. We're getting a divorce, and it's finalized. I don't want to say why out loud. Besides, you know them very well. Tell me, what time can you come and get your things? Jean was not going to give up without a fight, and Evelyn, who had overheard his conversation with his mistress, understood why. It wasn't enough for him what he would have gotten in a fair divorce. He wanted to take a bite out of the family pie, a bigger and tastier piece. This comparison, unintentionally brought to mind, helped the woman even listen to her unfaithful husband with some humor. Evelyn, I don't understand anything. I can only guess that Molly is involved in this whole situation. Beloved, if you want my opinion, such interference in purely family matters is out of line. Suddenly, Evelyn was even amused. Well, my love, and I thought that you would dare to call me a fat cow or a skinny cow. The fright seen in her husband's gaze gave the woman confidence, and she continued. You are mistaken if you think that Molly or anyone else but yourself is to blame for our divorce. I can't live with you anymore because you are a cheater, a traitor, and a two-faced man. You have completely lost my trust. So let me know when you can come get your stuff and let's finish this useless conversation with you. John, that's self-control. That's chutzpah. Noticing her friend's confusion, Molly entered the unpleasant conversation. I'm not going to moralize. It seems useless. Actually, the grounds for termination of the employment contract is more than enough. So, Miranda, it is better not to threaten, but to choose a less painful option of parting with your job. If you think about it, you'll realize Evelyn's suggestion is a real mercy. Most businessmen in her position, an accountant like you would have a fun life of litigation. And from the looks of it, John would hardly rush to the rescue. So you wonder what to do. Blushing, Miranda stalked out of the office. Her lover's behavior clearly indicated that he was not going to support her. John looked at Molly with hatred and then turned to Evelyn. Okay, I get it. You need to chill out a bit. I'll drive up to the house tonight around 8:00 p.m. and we can talk in peace and hopefully without witnesses. By the way, Molly, why don't you get on with your personal life and stay out of ours? The man left the office, slamming the door. Soon Molly, asking her friend to hold on, went to her workplace asking, "Shall I come up to your place tonight? I don't think you should go out alone with that creep. He's not going to be able to come up with anything." Evelyn shook his head. "Thanks, Molly. I guess it's not really necessary. My parents are coming over tonight, and you've done so much for me already. Although I'd love to see you. Maybe when the unpleasant part of John's visit is over, we can sit and talk like we used to." Molly looked at the screen of her smartphone and hurriedly said goodbye. "You know, I also missed our communication. I'll try to drive up without being late. I'm afraid John won't want to pick up his stuff peacefully. So if it's okay with you, I'm gonna take Robert with me. You remember him?" Evelyn, of course, remembered the classmate who was always trying to drive a wedge, but always failing. "Honestly, I didn't know he was in town. Didn't he leave? Anyway, sure, come by. We'll have a little reunion, and my parents will be happy. Plus, it'll put everyone in a different mood. Robert always knows how to be inconspicuous and the indispensable center of any company. I still wonder why you keep him at a distance, to be honest." Molly didn't answer the question, and making sure that her friend's thoughts were at least a little distracted from her troubles, she hurried away. She was indeed already almost late for work. John had prepared a real gentleman's set of reconciliation for the evening meeting with Evelyn, bringing with him a huge bouquet of her favorite flowers, a bottle of champagne, a decent brand, a baguette, and caviar. The man expected that the woman would not resist his charm and eloquence, as well as the delicacy. And with difficulty he suppressed a sigh of disappointment when the key failed to fit the lock. Because of this unexpected obstacle, his mood soured dramatically, but there was nothing to be done. He had planned to make peace with his wife, to beg her forgiveness so he could eliminate her later. Had to stand in front of the door, calming down, and wanted to get over his anger. When the rage-infused breath came back to normal, John pressed the call button. The fact that Evelyn was not alone in the apartment was another unpleasant surprise. His wife's parents stood behind their daughter's back with eloquent glances. But he, as if not noticing the bags and boxes in the hallway, said hello, crossed the threshold and spoke. "Evelyn, my love, we should at least try to negotiate this peacefully. And you've called in a whole support group. I meant it kindly. I meant it nicely. Maybe there's no reason for us to break up. I love you, you love me. Why do we need a divorce? Well, things happen in life. We all fall short of the ideal. We have to be able to correct our mistakes and work on our family relationships. Do you want me to confess my love to you in front of your parents? I'm still crazy about you. And you're all business, all business. So I've made a mistake. What man doesn't have an easy affair? I swear, my love, I swear on anything. I'll never look at another man again. What do you think?" Evelyn was shocked for the umpteenth time by the behavior, so far, of her husband. How calmly he speaks, with flowers, with a bag. So confident in his charm and the success of the visit. He calls me his favorite. God, how can I get through this meeting without crying in front of this scoundrel? Evelyn grinned unhappily and answered, "Here's what I'm thinking, John. How did I manage to marry such a lying monster? Only about 24 hours ago, you and your mistress were planning to eliminate me quietly. And now you're trying to make a good impression, make up. You even swear, as sincere as it may seem, that you'll be faithful. Good thing I didn't say, 'till death do us part.' In the context of what I heard last night, that wouldn't even be funny. Get your stuff and get out of my life. Just so you know, if you do bad things, you'll be dealt with. Take your chances for a peaceful resolution." The irritation that John tried so hard to conceal came out. "I take it these bags, so kindly packed to avoid wasting my time, contain only clothes. Actually, as an official husband, I'm entitled to some of the equipment too." "Evelyn, did you really expect me to just take the clothes? But that's not even serious. You can't equate nobility with stupidity. I'll take everything I'm legally entitled to, so if you don't want to waste your nerves, we'll settle this amicably. Here's how it works. I'll take everything I'm entitled to, and we'll have a quiet divorce." Evelyn's father intervened in the conversation. "Dear son-in-law, you seem to have a law degree. Remind me, what is the penalty for planning to commit a crime, a group of persons by prior conspiracy? You still want to take the equipment? What would you need it for in prison? Can you give me a hint?" While John considered how to counter this more than serious accusation, Robert, whom he didn't even notice at first, almost under his elbow, but without using brute force, led the man out of the apartment of his almost ex-wife. Following in the stairwell were out of the bag. Separately, Evelyn took out a boxed set, presented at the wedding by her mother-in-law. Then she ran back into the room and brought out a sturdy bag containing the game console she'd once given her adoring husband. "Here's John. There's also discs in the bag. Play, have fun, but don't even try to reconnect with me. It's over. I realize you're a fool for your integrity, but please don't bother me again. Enough for the sake of all the good, bright, joyful things between us. There's no need for any more of this." John answered nothing and abruptly taking, almost snatching from Evelyn's hands, the objects dear to him, turned around and went to the elevator. Yes, going to meet his wife, he had expected a very different result. During the day, when Evelyn had uttered unflattering epithets, he had hoped that someone from the staff had told her about the hurtful words. Now it was clear his wife had found out about the insidious plan to eliminate her. Apparently Miranda was right to be worried about the strange noise. "I should have gone yesterday to see what was going on. Maybe the situation would have turned out in his favor." Now the only thing left to do was to pack her bags and go to her mistress. Unlike John, who had been practically escorted out, the people left in Evelyn's apartment were in good spirits. Jenna and James, speaking in turn, suggested, "Stay with us for a while, Evelyn, while things calm down. In fact, let's all come over to our place now. We have specialty dumplings. We made a freezer full just yesterday." Robert smiled broadly, instantly remembering the hospitality of his former classmate's house. He didn't answer, however, leaving it up to Evelyn and Molly to decide. Evelyn and Molly looked at each other and nodded synchronously. Indeed, her apartment, betrayed by her husband, the woman now perceived desecrated. She decided to make repairs, at least cosmetic, and rearrange the furniture. She wanted to update the furnishings as much as possible so that nothing reminded not too long marriage. Having voiced her thoughts, the woman received the enthusiastic support of relatives and friends. Robert promised that in the near future he would call a reliable acquaintance who is engaged in repairs and will be able to carry out updates without nerves. Evelyn was grateful to her parents, who, sensing her mood, did not leave her alone and even arranged a small but well-fed and cheerful feast. After a little sitting with the young people, the hosts went to their room, and the 3 former classmates were engrossed in memories of funny school pranks. "Listen, Robert, what made you come back to the city of your childhood? There were rumors that you opened a hotel complex somewhere in the South." Evelyn asked. The rumors were right, but as always, a little distorted. I was actually living in the South, renovating my grandparents' house. My parents live there now, and they like the climate better than here. I also put a guest house on the plot so that my sister's family would have an autonomous dwelling. This building is far from being a hotel complex. Yes, and not for profit it was built, but without too much modesty to say, very cozy turned out. But I didn't want to stay there in the South forever. I have a heartfelt interest here. I lived a little away and realized that I can't go on. I've had enough of being a bachelor. And I'm tired of being afraid that someone more brazen will steal her away. Finally, I'm so happy for you guys. Of course, I'll organize a wedding cake of your choice and design. Just tell me what date. The evening, which had started so tense, even unpleasantly ended with a pleasant conversation discussing the details of the wedding. Evelyn was pleased for her friend and cautiously asked, "Molly, do you want to work with me again? In addition to a salary and a percentage of sales will be. Of course, I understand that you need to think about it. Well, if you don't want to, maybe you can recommend someone." Molly didn't lie. "You know, I think everything always works out for the best. This job that I have, I'm happy with it. And frankly, there's one more thing that's stopping me." Molly was silent, and then she turned to Robert. "Can I tell you one more of our secrets?" After a kiss on the cheek, which was decoded as permission, Molly told her friend about her pregnancy. "Well, that's the reason we decided to rush the wedding. Kind of like having the baby in a legal marriage. So, you know, there's no point in you hiring me. Maternity pay and sick leave, then let me go with the baby." Evelyn was glad that Molly and Robert, who had been waiting for her favor for so long, had settled down, and wished them nothing but happiness in her life. Things were complicated, however. John's parents overpowered her, persuading her both on the phone and in person that Evelyn must necessarily forgive her straying husband. Cindy's mother-in-law came to her almost ex-sister-in-law at work and began to lament to Evelyn. "Why are you mad at John? All men cheat, but some men manage to hide their affairs. John's an honest guy. He's not in the habit of lying. You should appreciate that. So right now in front of me, call and make an appointment with him." She's offended. If you ask me, Oscar Wilde was right when he said that resentment is the lot of maids. People who are self-confident don't allow themselves to feel that way. Enough of this nonsense. As far as I know, John is already desperate and does not even expect you to respond favorably to his initiatives. Why don't you take steps toward reconciliation? Think about it. You're 25 years old. Not exactly the freshest commodity on the marriage market. Divorced, even without a trailer. It's still not good enough. All you've got is an odd business in a field where competition is huge and ruin at any moment threatens, and arrogance. So pick up the phone, make the call. What are you waiting for? Evelyn, tired of listening to moralizing, gloomy forecasts, veiled remarks, insults, direct orders. So she said, "Dear Cindy, that's enough. I have endured listening to you for a long time, but I will not be silent any longer. I'm not divorcing your wonderful son just because he was having an affair behind my back with an accountant. I don't know how John put it to you, but cheating is nothing. What I never expected when I got married was that my spouse would get so tired of me that he would plan to physically eliminate me, and then bury me, or better yet, turn me to ashes. You should be glad I didn't report him and his girlfriend to the police. Not even those traitors, but you and your husband. It's hard to imagine what respectable parents can feel when they find out they raised a scoundrel. I hope you realize now that I will not call you, let alone reconcile with your son." Cindy said her goodbyes and left. Evelyn mentally reproached herself for not holding back and telling her mother-in-law the hard truth. But now she could be sure that there would be no more requests for reconciliation from her. Divorce and division of property was not smooth. However, with the help of an experienced lawyer who was recommended by Evelyn Robert, she managed to keep the entire chain of establishments. John gritted his teeth, as it was possible to prove the fact of repeated misappropriation of money from the accounts of his wife, Miranda. The man had to help his mistress out of this delicate situation because she promised to keep silent about the crime that they were planning. In fact, it turned out that John, after 3 years of married life, had only acquired a car. In addition, he had to move out of the cozy Evelyn apartment. With his parents, after the truth was revealed to his mother, he quarreled. Avoiding to upset her husband, Cindy did not tell him about the meanness that her son was planning. But the man was not happy without it and reprimanded John for parting with his clever wife. Miranda, her lover's parents, took it in stride. She, right at the time of acquaintance, capriciously declared that the negative attitude to himself is not going to tolerate, and John had to urgently look for a conveniently located rental apartment. Since the one rented by his mistress was far from the office, the man had to leave some of his things at his parents' place. Cindy, sorting out the bags and boxes at her son's request, sighed bitterly when she discovered that several teacups had been damaged during the move. So believed the omens about broken dishes and good luck, the woman thought. She felt sorry for her son, but even more ashamed of Evelyn for his unfortunate scheme. Indeed, such a thing from John, whom she and her husband had tried to bring up properly, a good man, she could not have expected in any way. There was nothing wrong for Evelyn in her new status as a divorcee, as her mother-in-law characterized it. The woman felt free and even happy. She decided to get rid of the room where she had overheard Joan talking to Miranda. Of course, it wasn't the Walls' fault that they were silent witnesses to a nefarious plan, but she didn't want to be constantly reminded of the negativity. She had to pay a small penalty to the owners, but Evelyn canceled the lease with the opening of the third cafe. The woman decided not to be in a hurry, but to pay close attention to the existing one, and without rushing to look for a new premises, the location of which will be more successful, thanks to the fact that Molly gladly accepted from Evelyn help in preparing for the wedding celebration. In the first month after the divorce was no time to think about how to continue to live after the terrible betrayal. In addition, it was necessary to look after the repair of the apartment, and of course, with particular trepidation, Evelyn and her assistants worked on the wedding cake. The products were not of the most standard type, but no one from the team was intimidated by the difficulties. As a result, the cake turned out to be a real work of art and became not only a wonderful decoration, but also an excellent dessert. Evelyn, although worried about her brainchild, had fun, as did the other guests. And she wished Molly and Robert well from the bottom of her heart. She was pleased to feel the gentle atmosphere of other people's happiness, and for the first time since she had met them, she felt nothing else but joy for their old acquaintances. There was no resentment and anger, no disappointment and despair. She was completely free of resentment. It was truly a wonderful feeling. Evelyn was learning to move on with her life. Though her parents did not kick her out of the apartment where the woman's childhood had been spent, she moved in. The kitchen and bathroom were barely renovated. I can sleep on the kitchen sofa, and in the daytime I am not at home, so there will be no inconvenience. The team of specialists, recommended by Robert's acquaintances, really worked qualitatively and quickly, and at the final settlement, Evelyn asked Mason, the main one from the team, "In about 3 months, or a little more, I will need to do some renovations in the room that will be used as a cafe pastry shop. There will, of course, be some nuances involved with both the finishes and the purpose of the room. Is it okay if I offer you such a job?" Mason was happy to respond, "Sure. If you want, I can visit the site soon, estimate the scope of work, preliminary estimate, of course. How long will it take to repair and the approximate cost?" "The thing is that there is no object yet," Evelyn admitted. "I can't find a room that meets all my requirements." When asked by the foreman about what the woman wants so special, she said that the location is important to her, what institutions are located in the neighborhood, the condition of the building and communications, and, of course, the cost of rent. And then she suddenly came to her senses and laughed. "Oh, I'm holding you up. I got carried away. Sorry, have a good day." The foreman, saying goodbye, promised to let me know if he heard about such an ideal room from Evelyn's point of view. The woman took it as a gesture of simple politeness. But a week later, she did receive a call from Mason. The man offered an option that seemed fabulous to Evelyn. After hearing the address, however, she grew sad. "Thank you, Mason, for your trouble. But in that neighborhood, the cost of rent is too high for me." However, the man insisted that Evelyn should definitely call the owner. "The owner's phone number is William. I'll text it to you right now. The interesting thing is that once 10 years ago, I was one of those who did the finishing work in this room. Call, maybe you can negotiate a discount. About your desire to open a cafe in a place like this," I told him briefly. "In general, try, after all, for the demand for money do not take money." Evelyn thanked the inadvertent helper in the search of the premises, and barely after receiving the message, made a call. William had indeed been alerted by Mason, but offered to meet for a detailed discussion directly at the premises the woman was interested in. Evelyn suggested that the business-like conversation, which had begun with a discussion of the details of the contract, continue at one of her 2 cafes. "William, I think you will be able to understand that your premises are optimally suited to my wishes and purpose." The imposing man agreed, but after the meal he grinned and said, "Evelyn, everything was delicious, and you are a real pro in the culinary arts. I'm sorry, but you're being very naive when it comes to negotiating a lease. Why are you making your interests so obvious? It's only natural that it would increase the rent, but I'm not going to profit from you." The man made a good discount, and after a while he became a guest of the new establishment. Not immediately, but a romantic relationship began between William and Evelyn. On the anniversary of the opening, the cafe was closed. Inside celebrated the wedding of newlyweds, whose destinies were linked by this room. 10 years later, William and Evelyn had a son and a daughter. The woman was happy, and about her unsuccessful first marriage, practically did not remember, until her cart collided with another cart at the supermarket. Evelyn began to apologize and was surprised to see Miranda standing in front of her. There was almost nothing left of the former beauty. Even her eyes had recently turned bright blue, as if they'd been watered down. Undoubtedly, she recognized her lover's ex-wife too, because she pushed Evelyn's cart and followed her. John, once so trim, turned from the perpendicular row of racks on which were located According to the sign Beer and Snacks, a stooped, gaunt man, who seemed to have fallen firmly under Miranda's heel, caused Evelyn's bewilderment. Had I ever been so hurt by his betrayal? The woman mentally even thanked fate for the pain she had to go through. But now, everything was perfect.